Yeah, right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good middle of the night for those of you joining us from Europe, I guess.
I
Welcome to the Medieval Buzz. And this week, Philip and I are going to be discussing a topic that keeps cropping up perennially, doesn't it?
oh,
Like every
stop.
once a week, I feel like these days. It's crazy. Hygiene. We're going to talk about hygiene in the Middle
Yeah,
Ages.
your stream
And we're
definitely keeps getting pulled into it
oh
because
my
the
gosh.
thing is that this year was last year was a big deal because that video game Kingdom Come had a ton of bats in it, so everybody was talking about bats. But we thought this was going off in a positive area because they had bats in the game, which showed
Yep.
good level of hygiene. They showed people getting changed, so we were like, oh yeah, this is going places clothing wise. Well, I know you had your level of
I
criticizing it,
mean,
but
yeah.
when it comes down to those details, it was actually quite good. And
Yeah, it
they had
wasn't
bats
bad.
on top of it, and they had some good hygiene. So we thought we were leaving that conversation in a really positive light. But
Yeah.
now we've come a good few months in, and now we have academics and famous historians on YouTube. I won't be going naming names unless you want to, but
Oh,
literally just blatantly saying people in the medieval era had no under women had no underwear in the medieval period, and it's like, like
right?
what the
It's like
hell?
a thousand. It's like for it, I don't understand why people think women are so different now than they've always been. Like, why is it? Do you think we've evolved new body parts in the last 100 years? Is something changed that drastically that you think women are any different now? And it's like if you look at the world now,
Mm,
um, women now, not all women wear underpants.
yeah,
Some do, some don't.
mm,
Why can't that be the way women have always been? Why is it? Why
yeah,
does it have to be they never did? There's a modern invention. It's really remarkable, and there are people who will die on the hill of women didn't wear underpants.
yeah.
And those same people sometimes will disturbingly die on the hill of during their menses, during their periods, women just freely bled into their clothes because that's comfortable and would smell
That's
so sweet.
completely insane.
It,
We've gotten so excited now. We got completely blindsided to what the hell is
yeah,
going on in your background,
yeah,
Rachel. Everybody's just like,
yeah.
"Whoa, Rachel, what the hell is going on
It's
here? Where
real.
are you?"
This is real. This is not CGI. This is real. This is a reconstruction of a 7th century bridge in the city of Gyeongju, which was called Sorabul back in the 6th century, the Shilla dynasty. This was one of the capitals of Korea in the first millennium. So yeah, I'm there today. It's cherry blossom season, so we decided to head here to enjoy the maximum cherry blossoms, and I thought this would be a perfect place from which to do our live stream.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it looks
So yeah, this
absolutely
this this
remarkable.
this is a bridge. Let me show you the bridge.
And it's a full reconstruction of a
Oh, it's a
6th
full
century bridge.
yeah
That's incredible.
full reconstruction. It has two massive tower houses. Here, I'll
Jesus.
I'll show you guys. Here,
Oh,
well,
please do.
normally this is not the point of this stream, but y'all are going to be super. You're going to love what I'm about to show you. So so yeah, it has two gatehouses. God, I won't be able to see anything because it's so bright out here. It has two gatehouses. How do I make this thing turn around? Camera. Which camera? Maybe I'll just have to do it this way,
Yeah.
right? So this is the
That's
gatehouse of this thing, right?
the level of detail is wild.
Yeah, they went all out on this thing, and
Why couldn't Ireland do something like that?
because Ireland doesn't have rich fuckers who will donate lots of money to these sorts of
I don't know. We also have a
these sorts of
government.
initiatives, right?
Yeah, yeah. We also have a
Yeah,
government that's absolutely diabolical.
yeah. So yeah, that's where I am right now. And they spent a decade excavating the creek around here so
Mm,
that they could figure out exactly what this all was.
mm,
And they found pieces of the bridge, actually. And they found timbers, in fact, in the mud. So they were able, based on illustrations of similar structures,
mm.
they were able to reconstruct it And so now you can actually, it's free. It's free. You don't have to pay to come onto this. You can just come and hang out here all day. And some people do, because it's frankly, it's gorgeous. I mean, you've got this
Yeah.
beautiful view of this 600-year-old village over there that still has, still the traditional style village, car free, cherry blossoms. It's, one of the most beautiful places in the world, possibly. Uh,
Very good question that fits into
yeah.
what you just said there. Did they use the same methods in construction or just used the same materials and architect they did in the 7th century?
So almost all of this was hand carved, hand hewn, hand sanded, hand painted. It was locked into place, by using the original methods. I'm confident I think they probably used some cranes to lift some of the heavier modern cranes to lift some of the heavier pieces, but they had cranes in this
Yes.
era. They just weren't powered cranes. So
Yeah.
yeah, they used as many of the original techniques as possible. So
Mm,
it's an amazing feat. The tiles on the gatehouse floor are based on originals they found, and they just made a mold from it, cast a mold from
mm,
it, and made a whole bunch more. There's not a nail in this thing. It's all mortar and tenon and pegs, right?
yeah.
This whole thing, and it mostly is held together mostly by weight, because the pieces lock into each other in such a
Mm,
way that gravity just holds it all together.
yeah.
So it's, yeah, I mean, look at the detail on the railing. These are reproductions of original ornaments they have found in, kind of everywhere here in the mud and in the tombs. So, they dove into the depths to recreate this amazing space.
Oh, it's absolutely it's brilliant. Like,
Yeah.
people are asking as well about your dress, Rachel. Your dress is gorgeous today. What is it?
Yeah. This is what modernly people call hanbok, which
Mm.
literally means Korean clothing, but that's a term that was invented at the end of the 19th century when
Ah,
Asia started westernizing.
mm,
Um, Mine is actually an 18th century style hanbok, so it's
yeah.
actually lots of pieces. We've got skirt, and we've got underlayers, and we've got a jogori, and we've got more skirts and paji pants underneath and everything. So this is not this is not the appropriate outfit for this architecture, this
Mm.
piece of architecture. But I do hope to make, an outfit that will actually be worthy of this at some point. But yeah,
Hopefully, that'd be absolutely amazing.
this is how people in the Joseon dynasty in sort of 18th century Korea would have
Century.
dressed.
Ah, right, right, right.
Aristocrats, wealthy women, courtesans, not your average servants, would not be walking around in silk, nor would they be walking around in rami, which is a very expensive cellulose cloth, base cloth, nettle cloth. So
Mm. Being an old noble enjoying the bridge today in the
yeah, yeah.
19th century.
And actually, this bridge has a really fun origin story, which may be apocryphal.
Mm.
The origin story is that back in the 7th century, the Queen Dowager, her husband had died, and the Sheila dynasty was a much more equitable society. Men and women were basically on equal footing,
Mm.
right? And so the Queen Dowager, being not very old, had a lover on that side of the river. But the palace was right behind us on this side of the bridge. There was no
Mm.
bridge though. And so she would actually have to take a boat across to go and visit her lover every night. And her son was so devoted to her, the king, that he supposedly built this bridge for her so that she would have easy access to her lover who lived on an estate over
Oh.
on that side of the bridge. And
Mm.
so the joke is they call this the bridge of filial, non-filial piety, because he was showing filial piety, some, child devotion to his mother by building
Mm.
her a bridge, but
Uh,
he was showing non-piety to the memory of his father by allowing his mother to have a lover after he had died. So yeah.
oh well. That's why it's called the Love Bridge.
The love
Oh,
bridge.
but
Now who knows, I mean, I haven't seen any primary source evidence of that, so that could just be a fun folk story that's kind of arisen over the centuries. We do know that for certain this bridge was built for large amounts of goods to be able to pass through. The center is very, very wide, so
mm,
you could have carts going in both directions very easily to
yeah.
transport goods from the surrounding estates that would have produced, all of the grain and the various edibles and that sort of thing. So,
Mm. Now, I'm terrible at Korean history, so I don't know which way to ask this question, but there's a quite interesting question, all right.
mhm.
But would they have chased away poors and beggars? I'm assuming chased away from the bridge, often times in the past or and in present.
Oh goodness,
They
right.
don't like poor or beggars hanging around to fancy places, do they?
In the present, Korea is a very affluent society, so they don't have it. There isn't a high rate of poverty here,
Yeah.
and they, where we are right now is kind of out. It's not in downtown. It's out at the edge of the city. This isn't a place where people would come and beg. But that's not done so much in
Yeah.
Korea. It's not nearly as
Same.
common as it is in the West.
Japan doesn't have beggars. It's homeless people, but it doesn't have poverty. Like the homeless people here, they woke up and were like, "Oh, society's not for me," and they've chosen to sleep out in the on the outside. And there are people who go out there, look after them, and try to bring them into society. But what happens is they become too comfortable because, and we've said this a few times. All right, trying to live in Japanese society right now because of the work culture is just too much. So people are
Right.
literally choosing to sleep outside rather than be a part of society again. So you
Yeah.
don't have beggars. Like beggars don't really exist in Japan. You have homeless people, but you do not have beggars, and
Yeah.
it's a massive difference compared to Ireland. In Ireland, you full on have poverty, very very bad homeless poverty in Ireland.
Yeah.
It's completely different in Japan,
It
because
is.
I thought the same thing as well. Like, I heard, oh, Japan is so amazing. I saw homeless people. I was like, oh, that's terrible. But then I got to know, because these are human beings. So you can talk to them, you can wave to them,
Yeah.
and they're completely sane of mind. They're not alcoholics. They're not on any form of addiction. They're just hanging around the place, and they're polite. Really generally nice people, and they set up their little tent in the evening and they just choose to sleep outside because they cannot handle the work standard of Japan, because
Yeah.
geez, it's very very overwhelming, to be quite
It,
honest with
it
you.
is. It
Mm,
is. There's a comment. I'm not in Seoul. We're in Gyeongju. We're in the south of Korea. So yeah, Seoul. So I just want everyone to understand that Seoul is not Korea. Seoul
mm,
is in Korea. It does not represent the country as a whole.
mm,
Seoul is its own, almost its own entity in many ways. Yes, there are still lots of homeless. There are homeless people. I didn't say there weren't
mm.
homeless people, but they're not begging,
Okay.
because there are a lot of food kitchens here.
uh,
Lots of food kitchens specifically aimed at the lower members of society. I volunteered at them, and they're actually I've talked to some of the people there, the patrons, the customers of these establishments, and they tell me that they actually have mapped out where the best soup kitchens are. They don't just serve soup though; they get a full meal. Like they get the complete spread with all the banchan and main dishes. But there is definitely still a large number of homeless people concentrated up in Seoul. They tend to sleep in the underground passages,
mm.
that are there as part of kind of the underground metro system. But you just don't see them out begging very often. It's very, very rare, very
Mm.
rare. Not like Europe, where in Europe you encounter beggars all the time,
Oh,
right?
it's so bad,
All the
with the
time.
homeless crisis in Europe right now. Oh, it's very,
Yeah,
very bad. I'm not going to go into politics because
yeah,
last
yeah. That's not
24 hours
that's not our
it's gotten
that's not
very
the point.
bad.
That's
Yeah,
not the point of this conversation.
yeah, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
And
But in the Sheila dynasty, when this bridge was built, so we're
mm,
talking the Sheila dynasty, uh, sort of the Sheila kingdom arises first in the first century BC, and it eventually, like Rome, spreads out, conquers all the other kingdoms around, incorporates them into their confederacy, and so it lasts until the early 10th century. So the Sheila dynasty is, the gap between wealthy and poor was much, much narrower than it is
mm,
now. And there was much, the system was much more equitable. There was more care for making sure that everyone was taken care of. Um, I don't, it's, I don't, I don't have access to the kinds of documents that could tell me about beggars in this era, because we don't have many records that have survived from this era. We have
mm,
records that have survived from the 10th, 11th, and 12th and 13th century that talk about this era,
mm,
or rather the 11th, 12th, and 13th century. But those, you always have to wonder, well, how accurate is something that was compiled centuries after the event?
Mm.
So it's not something I can tell you so much. I can tell you that um, that if I can guarantee you, if beggars were to set up at either end of this bridge, they would be shooed away by the tourist authorities.
Okay.
But I don't think they would do it. It just wouldn't. It's not something that we would do. Yeah. The Mongol invasion. Yeah, the Mongols invaded here, but especially not the Mongols invasion that caused the record issue. The Mongols did invade here. They burnt this bridge to the ground,
Oh,
by the way.
no.
Yeah,
Was
in
that
the
the
13th
original they
century.
burned?
But yeah, they burnt the original one to the ground.
Oh.
And there was a gorgeous temple with a 12-story pagoda that was built by Queen Sondok in the
Yeah.
7th century. They burnt it to the ground. They were basically trying to demoralize everyone, by saying, "Oh, look, well, if you don't abide by our governance, then this is what we're going to keep doing to you." So,
Were the Mongolians successful? I know this is going out of your field of expertise, but I was just wondering if you just generally knew the answer to this one. But were the Mongolians successful in conquering Korea, the way they were in China?
it became a client state. They did not take over. What they did was they married their women. So the Goryeo women, that's the Goryeo dynasty. Goryeo queens were generally Mongolian.
Okay, that's interesting.
And part of the exchange was, we will give you our Mongolian women and you will give us some of your beautiful Goryeo women, right?
Right,
because
gotcha.
because in Asia at that time, what's now Korea, depending on the era, could have been something else. But women from this part of the world were famed for being very, very beautiful because their faces were much more oval. And their features,
has changed.
they had paler skin. Their faces were more oval. They had more delicate features. And this is not me saying this. I'm quoting from original sources, right? And so what some historians joke that the Mongols invaded Korea not for political purposes, but for the women.
Yeah.
So,
It's funny because you hear the same thing said today from the Japanese. There's a lot of Japanese people that love are the Korean women or women here in Okinawa. You're loving that.
I'm trying to show people this is not AI. This is real.
It's definitely not AI. Who said it was
Not AI.
AI?
Some
No,
people
it's
are coming
real
on
as
with,
real
is she
can
really
be.
there? I'm really
Yeah.
here. I'm really in
Real
Korea. It's
person.
really cherry blossom season. See, really Korea. Koreans with their cameras on sticks, which is, and I don't know, could you hear that bird? That was a pheasant. There's
Oh,
pheasants that live over here
no
on
way.
this side of the bridge. Yeah.
That's
There's a whole
absolutely
bunch of
fantastic.
pheasants, and sometimes they come out quite often. I don't know if you can see that blue hill. Can you see the blue hill?
Yeah.
That's an excavation that is underway. So this over here was the fortress, was the royal palace, and you can see the earthworks. Those are man-made. Those were built back in the early Shilla dynasty. And so the palace used to be up in between all of those earthworks. And so they've been excavating the entire thing bit by bit. And it's things they found there that they've used to inform the reconstruction of things like this.
Yeah.
So
People
it's
asking, is there a very good vibe? Is there good energy on the bridge? Does it feel really
oh
great to
yeah,
be on the bridge?
this bridge is one of my favorite places in the world. I mean, I'm not kidding. I love to come here and just sit and sew, or just enjoy the atmosphere, read, chat. If they would let me, I would pull out one of my Korean picnic mats and just enjoy some tea, but they don't like people doing that here. I don't blame them. I mean, your average tourist would make a mess of it. So
I think you've answered this one before for Korea. What's the history of transsexuals and ladyboys in Korea?
yes, yeah.
Oh, right. What's anything else?
I mean, so in many parts of Asia, the ladyboys, as they're called here, can go out and about freely and be part of society, right? In Korea, it's not acceptable still socially.
Okay.
And so there are clubs, there are neighborhoods where you will find trans individuals kind of coming together because, there's safety in numbers, but you don't really see them out and about. And unless they've had a really good surgery to the point where you can't tell at all. But it's still a taboo thing here. Korea is slowly coming out of that. Homosexuality was illegal until very recently, and as it might still be technically illegal. I haven't looked in to see if that law changed or not.
Mm-hmm.
But when we first came here, it was illegal.
Ah, right. Um, Jesus, I lived in Korea. No way would I ever date a Korean woman. Hell no, they are worse than American women. Is it Korean women are just very high maintenance? I was assuming as well that Korean women were also very high maintenance as well. I don't think a lot of people say that about Japanese women, that Japanese women are high maintenance, but my wife is like really, really super chilled out, to be honest with
Yeah,
you.
I depend. I don't, I think it depends on what you mean by high maintenance, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
Korean, in general,
Mm.
Koreans have very high standards of cleanliness. And I don't
Yeah,
mean personal cleanliness, I mean the space, right?
yeah.
So for Westerners, that might be jarring because they're going to expect you to take your shoes off
Mm.
outside the door. They're going to expect
Yeah.
you to, help maintain a really clean space. And they will maintain a very clean space to the point where it might seem uncomfortable to Westerners. I
Mm.
don't. High maintenance though, I mean, in what way? I can't make that call. That's not a call I
Mm.
can make. I have
Yeah.
lots of Korean friends, but I don't date them. So
Oh, yeah, that's true. Um,
I will tell you though that lots and lots of US soldiers have married Korean women, and
mm,
many of them are still married to them.
okay.
So,
Yeah, but
you know,
when it comes down to the military, that's unfair though, because military men,
yeah,
I was in the military, and men in the military have high high cleanliness and all that stuff as well. So when it comes down to high
yeah,
maintenance, I could easily see a lot of lads. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of lads in the army are very filthy. To be honest with you, I don't think they could marry a Korean woman. But
yeah,
there's when it comes down to the military, there's some lads in there that are super clean. I could definitely see them being married
yeah.
to a Korean woman, no problem.
Yeah.
Um,
So I can't. I know that's a hard question. Atomic Core, a lot has changed about Korea in 10 years,
mm.
especially the trash situation. Korea is now one of the cleanest countries in Asia, easily.
Oh, was it bad at
um,
one stage?
yeah,
I
yeah,
didn't know that.
yeah. So he says that people used to put the food garbage all over the streets.
Mm,
So many apartment complexes now have their own internal trash handling facilities that you never see garbage bags on the streets at all.
mm.
So yeah,
God, I could never imagine that
yeah.
these days I look so much into YouTube and stuff and see how clean Korea is on YouTube. So I could never imagine it. To be honest with you,
Yeah.
I'll have
Yeah,
to
it's
ask
not. I
you
mean,
about that.
in the 12 years since we came here for the first time, there has definitely, when we were here 12 years ago, that was absolutely the case.
Mm,
But Korea's rate of development is breathtaking, almost in a literal sense. It feels like it's moving so fast
mm,
to become one of the cleanest, most modern, best developed countries in the world.
mm.
So yeah, yeah,
That's really awesome. Talking about cleanliness, what's the story
yes.
about cleanliness in Korea during the medieval period before we move back over to Europe?
I mean,
What's this?
Koreans,
Go
yeah,
on.
super clean, super clean. You know, cleanliness has historically by most people has been viewed extremely important, but in
Mm,
Korea and in Asia, it's generally, you know, everywhere has been viewed as important, not just cleanliness of your person, but cleanliness of your home.
yeah.
Koreans used to bathe in the streams and the creeks. We have actually illustrations from the 18th and 19th century of women bathing in the creek, and
Mm, mhm.
it's very interesting because they're actually wearing clothes kind of like mine, and they
Yeah.
just basically like hike their chima up, their skirts up, but they remove any pants or underpants, and then they just kind of squat in the river and they clean that way because the rivers here, if you look, see down there, right, it's dammed at that one end, so it's a little bit deeper than it might normally be, but if you look past that, the rivers aren't necessarily super deep. They're not navigable in many
Mm,
places. So, it's more like a creek. You can't immerse yourself, but you can definitely use the water to get clean. And they had
uh,
basins. They had basins at home. They had soap. They had lots of ways to clean their hair. So, Korea has kind of historically always been a very clean place. And even there, and I don't have one on this joggery, there's
mm,
actually this white band that you attach all the way around. Comes into popularity in the 16th century, it seems. This white band that gets attached on top of the decorative collar. And that white band is the thing that absorbs all the dirt and the oils that invariably kind of build up on your skin as the day goes through. And then eventually you just remove that band and replace it because you can't clean it anymore. It's too dirty.
mm. Ah, right, right, gotcha.
Yeah.
And what? How clean is the water in Korea?
Oh,
Is
now
one
it's really
question.
now it's really clean. So we have otters in
Ah,
Daegu, where we spend a lot of our time. We keep catching the otters out and about these last couple of weeks. So in the
sounds
river,
amazing.
in the river that cuts through a 4 million person city. See, not AI.
What the real? No way.
Not AI.
Mm,
Yeah, so the water is so clean that there has been a complete rebound of the wildlife here. There are so many beautiful water birds, so many fish, otters in the cities. So the water's got to be in a pretty healthy state when everything is thriving that way. So it's
mm.
definitely, again, big change in the last 12 years. Would I drink the water from the river? No, but I wouldn't drink the water from any river in any city in the world.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's just mostly because runoff from the road, no matter what, the
yeah,
runoff from the road is going to end up in the river.
yeah.
And cars leak oil and they leak gas and brake fluid and dust from the tires, right? And that all just kind of gets washed into the river.
Mm.
So I
Supposedly, the
wouldn't drink
rivers.
it,
Yeah,
but I wouldn't be worried about it getting on my skin. You know.
yeah. Supposedly, the rivers in Okinawa were very, very clean until recently, and now they've done
Mm,
recent tests, and now they're all poisoned between the chemicals coming out of various factories, and now plastics as well. So all the
right.
rivers in Okinawa now are poisoned, so you can't drink them
Yeah.
anymore.
No, I mean, I don't, it's funny. So that brings us to the topic of medieval hygiene. I just
Mm.
recently learned something about Paris in the Middle Ages.
Oh,
So um, in the 14th century, there is a manual of household, basically a guide to how to be the best housewife, but the
okay.
housewife of a very large, wealthy household.
Mm, mm,
And
mm.
this is written by a husband, an elderly husband for his young bride, because he knows he's going to die of old age.
Yeah.
She's going to outlive him. She's going to get a second husband. He wants her to have a successful second marriage. And in it, he says, whenever he talks about needing water
Mm,
for anything, he says, go to the Seine to get the water, because the Seine, the river that flows through the center of Paris, had the cleanest water.
mm.
And I don't know about you. I mean, I've been to Paris. I lived in Paris for a while. I would not go and get water from the Seine and use it to clean my body,
Yeah.
or cook or
Mm.
dye my fabric. But that's how clean the Seine was in the 14th century. And people have this weird misconception that medieval cities were so filthy that the water was stagnant and full of disease and they stank and you couldn't drink the water.
Mm, mm, mm.
That's not true.
Okay.
City to city, it's going to vary drastically. But
Mm.
apparently, in the 16th century, I don't remember. I think it was maybe Henry II. I think the King of France wanted to build sewers in the streets, and he wanted to direct the sewers to empty into the Seine. And the
Yeah.
townspeople said, "No, you will
Yeah.
not do that." Because they acknowledged that having the sewers dump into the rivers was a bad plan. But guess what
Mm.
London did with its sewers in the 19th century?
Oh, it dumped it in, didn't it?
Where
Yeah.
the Thames becomes completely disgusting and polluted. So
Mm.
this combats the idea of human progress as a linear function, right?
Mm.
And this is part of the reason that people imagine the medieval world as putrid, malodorous, filthy, contaminated, because they think about cities in the 19th century and, oh, well, they were so awful. Well, but that's the 19th century. It must have just been worse the further back you go, when in fact, that's not true at all.
Yeah, it's very funny how when we're studying history, we've got a lot of these pop ideas that we're progressing, we're getting better, but
Yeah.
that's not the case at all. Even right now, like in the last 2 weeks or so, you can see that we're dipping in our history and we're going
Yeah.
back up. It's a roller coaster. Instead of
Yeah.
just constant progressing, we're constantly full of ups and downs. This is
Yeah.
another question as well I have for you, just out of curiosity.
Yeah.
Is Koreans mostly doing all their washing in the 15th century in rivers, or are they
Yeah.
also having hot baths like we can see in Japan?
Um, I'm not bathhouses. That is an interesting question. I have not been able to find the answer about bathhouses here. So
Okay.
part of the problem with studying Korean history at the granular level is that
Mm.
all of those papers have been published in Korean, and it's a very academic
Yeah.
Korean.
Mm, mm,
And
mm.
my Korean skills are, I'm a 4-year-old level of Korean
Yeah.
speaker. So I don't have the skills to even do the searches to find the text so I can translate them.
Mm,
But I'm working with Dr. Minji Kim on this big project on historical Korean clothing research project, and I'm
mm,
hoping that through her guidance, because she's bilingually very fluent, through her guidance, she'll be able to direct me to at least the sources that talk about that, if they've even done research in that way.
mm,
Korea is just now coming into a place where it has the affluence to explore its own history at that level,
mm,
right?
mm.
Because after the Korean War, Korea was dirt poor, north and
Yeah.
south. And
Mm,
actually, for decades, the North was richer because the North had the Soviet Union sending it tons of money,
mm.
right? The reason North Korea is now in such dire straits is they never had to build a real economy because
Yeah.
the Soviet Union kept giving them money. And then when the Soviet Union collapsed, the tap was shut off.
Yeah,
So,
it is interesting that Asia is starting to somewhat mimic Europe in the way that it's starting to review its history
yeah,
from this kind of, especially with the connection of the Silk Road,
yeah,
because people want to look at the bigger, wider Silk Road, where before, I don't want to go into politics. But something happens in the 60s and China started looking more internal. But
right.
now, with the Silk Road getting more popular and China
Mhm.
wanting to really show off its trade networks, it's starting to look at Europe and starting to do a comparison at the way Europe looks at its medieval history
Yeah,
and starting to turn around and say, hey, we kind of fit in with this. But the difference being, where we would place our medieval period, and I was talking to Yuki about this, and it goes to show, like, even the definition of what is medieval is quite complicated because of the fact that we kind of meant to set our date for the medieval period as starting at 476. But the
right.
Chinese recently, last year, with the Silk Road shows that they were having in Hong Kong and
Goes
Beijing
back
and
way
stuff,
further. Yeah,
yeah, they
goes
place
back
their
way further.
time around, and even on top of that, they're a bit, there's a lot more to it. But they place, if they were going to give a exact date, they would give it 220 would be the date. But even on top of that, they would turn around and say, "Hey, look, but you also need to look way back to around 130 to see the collapsing of the Han Dynasty." And on top of that, there is no dark age in China. China
Yeah.
never has a dark age. It's got
Yeah.
periods where
I
it
mean, I
dips.
mean, yeah, yes, yeah, I was just thinking, I mean, you might actually, the Qing dynasty might be towards the end of it, especially might be its darkest time.
Yeah,
But yeah, there's never a complete collapse of civilization.
yeah.
Yeah.
Compared to at least in Europe, there's periods where there is a dark age. There's periods where history just whoop. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, what happened here? And then light gets turned on again, and it's like, oh yeah, that mythology stuff happened there. And it's like, what do you mean the mythology stuff? Well, there was a guy called King Arthur, and he unified the British, and they wiped
Yeah.
out the Anglo Saxons. But the Anglo Saxons are still there. What's going on? Oh, and he also
Yeah.
found a goblet to Jesus and the holy relics and stuff. And you're like, oh my god, what the hell am I reading?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a fantasy tale for certain.
Oh, yeah, but it's
Yeah.
just interesting that the interpretation, although we're starting to align with Chinese history, even medieval period itself isn't properly defined yet. Even when the fact that it's only now they're starting to look at the Silk Road and starting to compare their medieval period, a period where we're going to the end of an ancient era, we're having that middle point, and then we're going into a modern period, an early modern period. And it's just interesting to see China making those adjustments and changes and coming to the conclusion of saying, hey, wait, actually, if we're going to be a part of this medieval community, we'd have to start the date in 220, not
Right.
in 476, because 476, our administration has already completely changed from ancient China into what you're now calling the medieval administration of China.
Yeah. Yeah. I just there was a comment, come on, chase these people out. I'm not certain about whom you're speaking. I might not be seeing all of the comments. The live stream chat can sometimes, ironically, not show me the person live streaming everything that's being said. Um, so I'm not certain. Philip, do you see anything in the chat that
I
looks like
think that
it's
person's just joking around and calling you a spy. I think they're just
oh,
having a
oh,
laugh. I don't know.
these people are only here to destroy and distort our rich and timeless Oriental culture. Um,
I think you're
I
a
don't know.
troll. I
I,
would
I
say.
don't know what people you're talking about. I'm actually in the process of researching and bringing to light the beauty and richness of
Mm.
Korean culture. So that's the opposite of destruction, I guess. um, yeah, definitely. And I mean, the timeless is maybe not true because there is a time when all civilizations sort of start. So it
Mm,
hasn't been around forever. And also, I would never call timeless. That's an insult to Asia because that's
mm,
like saying Asia hasn't developed or grown at all, where it has. It's,
mm,
there's centuries of innovation and development and change and growth here that's happened. I mean, a lot of the innovations that Europeans claim they had first, they had in China first, or the Chinese had something like it first, but the Europeans actually came up with their own solution later, independent of the Chinese invention. But,
mm.
you know,
I agree with the comment
yeah,
section.
yeah,
There's only a bit of
yeah,
trolling, a bit of banter, a bit of
yeah,
bait, as they call it. Um,
yeah.
oh
Are,
yeah,
are
this was an interesting as well. What's the difference? You see, I have no clue about food when it comes down to Korea. But what's the difference between American chicken
oh
and
God.
Korean chicken?
American chickens look like they've had boob jobs, right? Like they're so
Yeah.
they've been bred to have the biggest, fattest breast meat you can imagine, and they are monsters. But the Korean chickens are definitely still much smaller. You get,
Mm,
I get Korean chickens from the Korean butcher, and they are almost the size of what we might call Cornish hens in the US.
mm,
Yeah, so no, Korean chickens are still of a reasonable size. They haven't been bred to be monstrous versions of their
mm.
original self.
And I'm
I'm
assuming
currently in Korea, for those who are wondering. We're in Gyeongju. This is not an AI backdrop. This is real.
it's absolutely amazing backdrop.
Yeah, it's pretty
And
splendid.
I'm assuming what's going on there is so they would have been the same chickens that they would have had all the way back in the medieval period
I
as
mean,
well. Is what we're asking.
they've probably bred them to. I'm assuming they've bred them to lay eggs more often. I'm
Mm,
assuming that they have bred them to be more meaty. They just haven't done the kinds of things we've done to them in the US to make them to the point where all they are meat bags and can barely do anything else. They can function in almost no other way, right?
mm.
That's so they've probably, they have no doubt bred them for selective features. They just haven't done it to the same extreme that we've done in
Fair
America.
enough.
No
So
Purdue chickens here. Yeah.
so we've established that they definitely had hot baths in Japan. Did they have hot baths in Europe? Because I
Oh God, yes.
remember they definitely did. But
Oh
what's
yeah.
the story? What's the story then with the
I don't know.
Portuguese
I don't.
story?
This
Go on.
this so this again. This comes down to what I was saying earlier. So I was looking into why. Why is it that people have these misconceptions about medieval Europe and hygiene? And there's so many reasons, and all of them are bad, but all of them make sense.
Yeah.
So in the 19th century is when in Europe and
Mm,
America is when poverty levels reach the highest level. It's when the cities are the dirtiest. It's when the people are the dirtiest. It's when there's the most concentration of contagious disease outside of plague periods, right? Because you've got cholera, you've got smallpox, you've got all of these diseases of that result from people living in close quarters with one another and not having proper sanitation.
mm,
And it's all because of industrialization. The
mm,
fact the enclosure acts drive people out of the countryside, away from the places where they were once able to graze animals without having to own lots of land. The
mm,
enclosure acts close all of those commons, which meant that anyone could have a pig and a sheep and a goat and maybe a cow, and they could go graze it on the common land and then take it back home at night. Well, once you close the commons and you give it to the aristocrats, then suddenly they can't have those animals anymore because they have no place to graze them. So
uh,
that drove people from the country into the city starting in the 16th century. And so that's why the cities start growing massively.
mm,
And so you have this concentration of people, but the cities aren't designed for that concentration of people, for that much waste matter, for that many people living in such tight quarters. And so that's where you start to see real squalor arise. And then the Industrial Revolution comes along, and you've got people working in factories, you've got pollution on a whole new level. And sanitation by the 19th century, a lot of the things they used to do in the Middle Ages to keep towns and cities clean, they'd stopped doing for whatever reason.
mm,
In the Middle Ages, many towns and cities paid people to go and pick up waste products like feces, to collect up urine, to collect any other, undesirable things that had accrued in the streets. Every day, they would go and clean the streets because, honestly, feces were a product, not a waste product. They were a useful raw material, not a product. They were a useful raw material for a variety of things. Fertilizer, they were used, especially urine was used in many different processes to make a variety of materials. So we actually have records of payments to people whose job it was to clean streets in medieval towns and cities. And for some reason that goes away. I don't know why. In many towns and cities. And then in the 19th century, cities like London start building sewers that empty into the rivers.
Yeah.
Right?
But it's even Dublin. Dublin gets very, very bad, especially with the diseases and everything. And obviously, because the British administration really hates Dublin in the 19th century, they're not doing anything to improve the hygiene. And people have been, because the population is having a boom as well, there's multiple families living in entire apartments in, what was it called, Dublin, but they're crammed into rooms. And the reason why they're being moved into apartments, is because the actual rich who used to live in Dublin, they've moved out. Dublin's become too infested with disease. So it's definitely compared to the way it was during the medieval period, where there's some type of, and Dublin was never perfect, but God, it gets way worse in the 19th century. So it just kind of proves our point that you have, go on.
Yeah, no, go on. Yeah, finish. Proves the point.
But
Go on.
It proves the point that there's periods where you have a good time and then suddenly you slip down, have a bad time, and then it goes back up again. So it's more like a roller coaster when it comes down to human development rather than us just going straight up and off to space.
That's the answer. Everyone keeps asking me, why is it that this changed? And my invariable answer is human development is not a linear function. It's just not. Human progress is not a linear function. We're not always getting better. On a good day, we're taking 3 steps forward and only 2 steps back. On a bad day, we're taking 2 steps forward and 3 steps back as a species, as in terms of how we progress and develop, right? And so when you calculate that all together, it means that over the 1,000 years that is the Middle Ages, there is no one answer, right? It's the 1,000 years of the Middle Ages is not the same. All medieval cities and towns are not the same. And even the same city or town over that 1,000 years can go from being more or less developed, depending on what's happening. If wars, plagues, famine, shitty weather. In the early 14th century, there's like 4 years where it just rains in Northern Europe. And I mean, it just rains. Like 1314 to 1318. Does that date sound significant? 1314, right? So 1314 to 1318, it just rains and the crops fail. And there is a massive famine all across Northern Europe. And that kind of weakens the population so that when the Black Death comes along, when Yersinia pestis pays a visit, well, the population isn't necessarily at its best anyway, because all the people who grew up during that famine grew up with malnutrition, right? They had deficits. So they might not have had the best immune systems to cope with, the plague. And that might actually be one of the things that made a difference between who survived and who didn't. There's studies coming out about that now. They're trying to look at the people who survived the plague versus the people who died in the plague cemetery or the plague grave pits. And they're looking at the role nutrition may or may not have played in immunity.
It's interesting. All right. Gary also has a very good point as well, is that the Romans had been, built bats during the ancient eras. And so even as we go into the medieval period, we already have bats in Europe.
They're there.
Did they rebuild those? What happened to the bats during the medieval period?
So we have to talk about the Justinian plague again.
Okay.
I don't know why the Justinian plague is never mentioned in most history classes, most high school history classes, right? No one hears about it. We hear about the Black Death. We hear about the Great Plague in London, but no one talks about the Justinian plague. It's like the first millennium doesn't even matter. It's like, well, Rome ends in 476 and that's all she wrote. But that isn't. Rome doesn't end, right? It doesn't. Roman civilization does not end in 476. It's not like one day everyone had working sewers and the next day they didn't. the infrastructure actually keeps going for until the sixth century,
Mm,
when Yersinia Pestis pays a visit to Europe,
mm,
going from the east, working its way west. Constantinople loses some like 10,000 people a day or something like that at the height of the plague. Like
mm,
it's crazy death rates, right? And that the plague reaches all the way up to the British Isles. They have now
mm,
discovered in the last couple of years doing bone studies. And they realized that it actually led to a massive die off that led to a depopulation. And that depopulation, I'm sorry, there's a school here. Damn it. Sorry, I apologize if the background noise gets a
no,
little
it's
loud. Anyway,
completely fine. Although
as long as
some people think
I
it's what was it, AI in the
it's
background.
not AI, not
It's
AI.
real.
Look, I can touch it. I can
Mm.
touch it. I can touch it. It's real, not AI.
Mm,
Um, so that massive die off means that entire towns and villages are abandoned. They're ghost
mm,
towns, right? And we can actually see that in the archaeological record. In a lot of they've been doing archaeological digs in England, for example, and
mm,
they find that a place that was thriving in the 5th century is at the end of the 6th century. Suddenly, there's nothing anymore. There's nothing
mm,
in that layer. Nothing. Not a single indication of human activity whatsoever. So estimates are anywhere from 60 to 90% of the population die, depending on where you are in the Justinian plague. And so that massive level of die off means that the level of you no longer have critical mass to maintain the technology, right?
mm, mm, mm.
Complex infrastructure requires a lot of people to maintain it. It
Yeah.
requires people who know how to
Mm,
maintain it. You need engineers. You need professionals, skilled professionals who know how to make concrete that heals itself. You
mm,
need skilled professionals who know how to build domes and maintain domes. You need skilled professionals who understand, masonry. And when you have that kind of die off, all people care after that, during that, and after that, in the immediate aftermath, is surviving. Right?
yes.
You can't devote effort to maintaining beautiful bathhouses anymore.
Yeah.
So in
Yeah.
a lot of places, those bathhouses do close,
Okay.
just because either there's not enough people left to use them and or maintain them.
Mm-mm-mm. A few questions about your clothing as well. Why do you have red? Is red popular in Korea?
It is.
And there was one more, and one person thinks, is it to keep evil away? Does red in Korea keep evil away?
Red, a color that keeps evil. So, as you can tell, red is
Mm,
indeed very prominent. Not just in terms of clothing. Yes, red in clothing is very popular up until the early Joseon dynasty, where it's not that it stops being popular; it's that red gets designated a royal color.
oh,
um,
become super
um,
popular.
yeah, but we actually have an extant dogori, that's this layer from the
Mm,
16th century, that is this amazing cloth of gold red damask.
mm,
And they've reconstructed it at the museum that's local to me and actually showed how they remade the fabric in the original fashion. And it's this gorgeous shade of red. And that was just a regular old noblewoman. That was not a queen or anything like that. I haven't actually heard that red is a particular um, that it offers some kind of particular talisman against evil, or
mm,
but it is one of the 5 primary colors. It's one of the 5 elements, right?
mm.
So it is a very important color from that perspective, and probably no doubt was meant to convey some kind of protection, but I haven't heard any lore about it being particularly protective.
Mm. Just jumping back over, okay, so we
Bondegi.
have houses that are shut down going into Justinian plague with so many
Yeah,
people dying off. When it comes down to hygiene, then going into the early medieval period and the medieval period,
yeah,
what techniques from the Romans survived and what's lost? Like what kind of
yeah.
how does hygiene change going from the ancient Roman world into the medieval European world?
So it seems that people are still keeping clean. And there's actually a historian who writes about the barbarians, the Germanic tribes
Mm,
that were kind of successively entering Europe from moving east to west. And he talks about how they bathed in the rivers,
mm,
right? even these nomadic peoples who don't have architecture because they're nomadic at this stage, the people observing them who are, former Romans, depending on how you want to call them, the
Mm.
the people who were settled in the towns and villages, observing them, noted that they cleaned in the rivers. That for, even when it was cold, they went to the river and they washed.
Mm.
So it seems that even in the first millennium, there is evidence of people finding ways to clean themselves. Okay, there's no bathhouse. Well, there's a river. It's cold, but you know what? If we move quickly, we can get the job done.
Yeah.
And we can move on. And all you need, you don't need a lot of fancy things to stay clean. Despite what someone very charmingly quoted as the everything shower that many of us take once a week, where we do all the things, right? We do the grooming, we do the treatments, the salt treatments, and all of the extra hair soakings, right? But really all you need is a cloth
Yeah.
and water, and that's it.
Mm.
You don't even need soap, right? A
Yeah.
cloth and water and rub-a-dub-dub, and that's it. Water is a solvent. It's the
Yeah.
universal solvent, right?
Well,
The only thing soap does is make it wetter. Basically,
mm.
it breaks the surface tension.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is the thing that always kind of annoys me is that people assume that these barbarous, savage people, especially from the Germanic areas, would not bash, and they would just,
Yeah,
that they were just kind of used to it. And I'm like, but
yeah,
how do you stop the itch? Because eventually your skin is going to get itchy because of all the dead cells and the buildup of everything. So
yeah,
it's like common sense would tell you there's a relief when you go down and you wash this stuff off.
yeah.
So that kind of thought process just doesn't get to me, to be honest with you. It's like a myth that just doesn't click. I
Yeah,
don't know. I like.
it has to come from people who haven't tried it, right? Have
Yeah,
you tried not bathing, not
yeah,
washing ever? Have you
mm,
tried just letting dirt build up on your skin? Does it feel good after
yeah,
months and months of doing that? Have you tried just leaving mud on your face? Like
mm,
just like they sell in all the medieval movies that they make now, right? There's people walking around with just mud just everywhere. And,
yeah.
and, and I mean, I get mud on my face and it dries, and I immediately start trying to get it because it's not comfortable.
But this is what I find funny about actors is actors will put all the stuff on, and every single time they always say that famous line, "I don't know how people lived like this during the medieval period," and it's like they
Yeah,
didn't. That's
they
why.
didn't. Yeah, they
Yeah,
didn't. That's why. Exactly. This isn't how they lived. No one lived
yeah.
this way. No one wore clothes like that because guess what? Your costumer made you inaccurate clothing.
Yes. I don't know. It's so funny, like because I always see that in all the movies and everything. People are just like, oh, I don't know how people lived like this during the medieval period because what you're trying to depict is a lie. you know,
Right.
it's
Uh,
absolutely wild.
what did they use for a toilet? I guess he means what did they use for a toilet? Yeah. So before the flushing toilet,
Mm.
well, before the modern flushing toilet, because Philip, they had flushing toilets in ancient Rome, right?
No, I did not.
You
Actually,
did
no, I
not.
did not. I didn't.
You've never seen the toilets from Pompeii or from Ephesus, the public restrooms that have survived from ancient Roman Ephesus.
No, I haven't. My
Yeah,
wife is fully aware of all this, but I'm not.
yeah. So they actually had public restrooms in ancient Rome, and they
Mm-hmm.
were basically like one big open room, and there was a bench with toilet seats. You
Mm.
just kind of sat next to each other, and the water flowed through underneath. So
Yeah.
everything that was done through the hole into the toilet, the water flowed through and carried it away. So they had flushing toilets.
I wonder if
Yeah,
Acker has flushing toilets as well, if that's the case, because remember their empire literally survived on flowing water. Water
yeah,
constantly had to flow through the city, and then the moment they had a drought, that was it. In the 15th century, they just collapsed.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so I do wonder if that's the case as well in Asia.
I know that in Spain in medieval Islamic Spain, they had
Mm,
flushing toilets like that. I mean, but in Islam, cleanliness is so very, very like extra, even more important.
mm,
Like
mm, mm.
because it's not just cleanliness is godliness. It's like you have to be clean in order to enter the house of God, of Allah, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they actually have like foot bathing stations outside of all mosques.
Mm.
Um, Yeah.
The stick is true, though. I
Yeah.
have anytime I've come across sources,
Yeah. The
people
stick.
sharing the same, yeah,
The
people
stick.
sharing the same
Yeah. I
stick to
can't
wipe
argue with
themselves.
that. Can't argue with that. It's especially to our modern perspective, especially now that we understand germ theory, right? They
Yeah.
didn't understand germ theory. They didn't,
Mm,
there was no way they could have understood germ theory.
yeah.
They could understand cause and effect, but they couldn't necessarily understand about the microbes that you're going to share
Mm,
by sharing the sponge on a stick. But
yeah.
but but at least Philip, they used a sponge on a stick to clean their butts, right?
Yeah.
I
At
mean,
least.
seriously, think about it. First off, that means your hands aren't getting anywhere near your derriere,
Mm.
right? Oh goodness. Okay, so they're trying to get a jump picture behind me, so that's why you hear people jumping. They were,
Oh.
yeah, it's very popular here in Korea for people to jump together
Yeah.
and for them to try to catch you while you're jumping in midair.
Ah. Yeah.
So if you hear thumping, that's what's
That's not
happening.
too bad. I can still
Yeah.
hear you.
Anyway,
What's beside?
so
Oh
I mean, I just
yes.
I,
Go on.
I just feel like a sponge on a stick in general is a better idea than just kind of taking some paper and wiping your butt with your hands. Sharing the sponge on a stick is maybe not my favorite part of that, though.
Mm. And also on top of that as well, I know in Ireland, we it was mostly moss. Moss was used,
Mm,
to wipe your bum after you've
right,
done your little job. Um, what did women do at that time? Because I know this was a huge, massive
mm,
argument this week,
right.
especially yesterday. It was red hot, and it was around when women have their time in the month. How would they look after themselves?
Yeah, it's yeah, God knows that's the latest argument, right? I don't know
Mm,
how many of you out there have heard that historically women just free bled,
mm.
which means people say women didn't do anything. They just let the blood flow into their clothing, stick onto their skin. It was perfectly fine. No, it's not. It is absolutely not. So,
It's natural,
so
Rachel. I don't know what the problem is.
yeah, right, exactly. Who? What am I complaining about?
They were all
Um,
neo pagans, and Christianity got forced upon them, and now they have
yeah,
to wear underwear because of the Christians.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Next week,
yeah,
I swear, that's going to be the thing of next week. Next week, Christians forced women to wear underwear. Stand
yeah.
by.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh God. Moss. So moss is definitely something that was used in places where moss was common because
Mm,
moss doesn't actually grow everywhere. It does not grow in arid climates.
yeah.
So if you're in a dry place, you're not going to do that. So yeah, so in in Northern Europe, moss was definitely used. We actually have, some of you heard me say this, that in the Norse colony in Greenland, there is a grave that was excavated back in the 20s, and it turned out to be a woman. And
Ah,
she had remnants of a string around her waist and a string that was a woolen string that ran
mm,
between her legs, and there were fragments of moss attached to it.
yeah.
And so they're pretty certain that this was indication that she died probably while during her period, and they just buried
Mm,
her that way. And studies have since been done to show that especially sphagnum moss, but there are other kinds of moss that work as well, is so absorbent. It absorbs 20 times the liquid
mm,
of its weight. Like, so it can absorb way more liquid than cloth can,
mm.
and it retains it, right? And it's antimicrobial. I mean antibacterial, antifungal. It's all of those things, and it has a good pH that is comfortable for skin. So it would be good for your skin. It wouldn't cause any kind. There'd be no risk of acid burns or base burns or something like that. And you can
Mm.
actually rinse it out and reuse it. So moss makes a lot of sense. And you know what I found out? I found out that I think in the 50s it was in the US, there was actually a moss menstrual pad that you could buy. It
Okay.
was a commercially available product.
Mm.
Um, but apparently, Americans were so disgusted by the idea of using natural products like a plant that it didn't take off. Unfortunately, how sucky is that?
Ah, stop. It's like when you bring what was it called? Actual what was it? You explain to a child now. This has been happening for the last 20 years where if you explain
Yeah.
to a child how meat is made, like how a burger is made, the child would just like his mind would be completely blown apart because of the fact that they think that burgers are just born They're
Right.
grown in
They're
shops.
just born.
Yeah, they just grow in shops, and that's it. They're
Oh my
perfect.
God.
There's so
Oh
many
my
children are
God.
just completely. I'm not saying all children, because thank God they have access to the internet at least. But
Right.
the majority of children just assume, and this has been happening for the last 20, 30 years now, where children have become so disconnected
Yeah.
from what was it called, the wider natural world, that's how they respond. So it doesn't surprise me that
Yeah.
something like that happened.
It's really it's yeah. So and of course, and this I've seen this in a lot of the comments. I recently produced a short, two shorts
Mm,
actually, that talk about using moss for menstrual flow, and so many women have chimed in with, "Oh my God, but it'd be dirty and full of parasites." I'm like, first off, I don't think you know what a parasite is.
mm,
Um, and other people, and full of insects. Like, no, you. Well, first off, you would rinse it. You don't just like pull it off the ground and apply. You rinse it first.
yeah.
But this actually led me to find out this was something I just recently learned. In World War I, they
Mm,
used moss to pack wounds because they ran out of fabric. They ran out
yeah.
of fabric bandages. And so they actually, in the UK and maybe in other places in Europe as well, they had moss collection drives. So
Mm,
people would go out, entire communities would go out into the forest, into the bogs, and they would collect moss to send to the front lines. And
mm,
because the moss is antimicrobial and antibacterial and oh so absorbent, it prevented infection. So,
mm.
so many soldiers' lives and limbs were saved because they started having to pack wounds with the moss. And it turned out that the moss was a way better choice than fabric was.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Gary's got a very good point as well, is that we are starting to lose a lot of the old skills that we had back in the medieval period, specifically around hunting. Medieval people were far superior hunting than we are today. Like, I haven't gone hunting for
right.
what, 10 years or so. My skills must be absolutely diabolical. And there's some people who have, you go through entire life not hunting whatsoever, and that includes fishing. There's so many people that have never gone fishing in their whole
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
So yeah, 100% agree with you. It's a very good example. Like, how are you supposed to say we're evolving as a society when our hunting skills are absolutely diabolical? I
Yeah.
was saying this to Yuki actually, and I don't really want to be going into the conspiracy level, but we have become so what was it called, dependent on the state for
Yeah.
everything, that if we were to have a dark age tomorrow, if Trump was to turn around, just like he turned
Oh
around to the
God.
UK, what was it, 2 hours ago, and said, go and look after yourself. If Trump was to turn around in the next hour and turn around to your own people and say, okay, everybody has to look after yourself, you're not state dependent, I'm closing the shops, so many people would starve.
Oh, they would starve.
So many people would starve. They
They,
wouldn't know what to do.
yeah. Yeah, they know they it would be bad. And that's one of the things I love about doing living history is that actually by doing this experimental archaeology, I actually learn real skills because I
Mm,
can make things from raw materials. Like I can make rope. I know how to make rope from grass.
yeah.
I can I can go out and scavenge or uh, uh, forage. I can go out and forage, not mushrooms. I'm still not good at mushrooms. I will leave the mushrooms alone because they can kill you if you pick the wrong one. But I
Yeah.
can go out and forage herbs, green things, right?
Mm,
I know how to fish. Hunt, I've never actually gone hunting, so I'd
mm,
have to figure some things out in that regard.
mm.
But all these, I know how to build a fire from nothing, from
I'm
from
terrible at
from
it.
from tinder and from a flint and steel. I can start a
Yeah.
fire, right?
Yuki's better
So
than me at what was it, starting a fire. She's very, very gifted at starting a fire. I am diabolical at starting a fire. For everybody that's just jumped on there,
not
hello, good
AI.
morning or good evening, depending on where you are. Rachel is live from Korea.
I
Rachel,
am.
where are you? Are you on some kind of
Yeah.
castle, or are you on a boat? Where are you, Rachel?
Yeah, so this is the bridge of filial nine non-filial piety Waldong-gyo, and I'm here in Gyeongju, South Korea. This is a reconstruction of an original 7th century bridge, right? So it was just opened in 2019. They finally opened it after years of research and construction.
19, Jesus.
So it's a real bridge. This is not AI, guys. Yeah. Right. So what am I wearing? This is now referred to as hanbok, which literally means Korean clothing. This is an 18th century style one though, because it has the jogori, the jacket comes, down to about here, and it's relatively fitted, but it's not super, super, super tight. And the chima, the skirts are worn around the waist. So that's how I'm dressed. I'm dressed as an 18th century Joseon noblewoman, basically. Yeah. What happened to the original? The Mongols happened to the original.
Yeah.
As far as that's what I've been given to understand anyway. It seems that the Mongols came through here and set a whole bunch of stuff on fire in the Goryeo dynasty. So
But the castle is quite the original castle before they burnt it down. That was on the left side, wasn't it? Well,
yeah, so
whatever.
the palace is over here. And that's where they're excavating the wall, the earthworks berm that they built all around the plateau. And on top of that earthworks used to be a stone wall, like a beautiful stone wall that kind of looks like the Great Wall of China, right? But when this stopped being the capital, and then when the Mongols basically razed the rest of it to the ground, people basically took all those raw materials and used it to build their homes. So there isn't much of the original stone left. They have the foundations, and they've been excavating the royal palace. And I'm hoping that they're going to rebuild it. That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping they rebuild the Sheila royal palace, because that needs to happen.
Oh, why? Ancient China, God, it was like space age. Just someone in the comment section saying that they do a lot of research into ancient China, and it's
Yeah.
shocking how advanced they were
How
during that
advanced they
period.
were. Yeah. The same thing here. So this was a client kingdom of the Tang dynasty. Sheila was, and Sheila was known as the kingdom of gold, because they had iron here.
Okay.
They had naturally occurring iron in massive quantities, and so they smelt iron into iron ingots. And iron in that era, that's the late Iron Age, that is massively important, because it is the far superior metal for any application that requires any sort of force. And so they were smelting iron ingots as a form of currency, and so they could trade away their iron ingots and get gold. And so the tombs here, and unfortunately you can't see any of the giant pyramid-sized tombs that they have everywhere around here, are full. Every one has a coffin in it, a tomb inside of it that is filled with gold. So yeah, this is a pretty interesting place. Yeah, really quite beautiful.
It's quite interesting as well, because they start their Iron Age just way before us, because we start Iron Age around 300 BC, and they start their Iron Age in the 4th century BC. So yeah, it's no shock that they actually explode as a society in Iron Age. You're having guests and visitors there on the side.
Yeah. This is so not many Koreans actually wear their own traditional styles, and they don't wear the historic stuff. Like, they wear the modernized stuff. So this is an 18th century silhouette. It's not like they wear it now. So Koreans love seeing me in this. So I get requests for picture taking all the time. Oh yeah, no, don't fear not. Those little trolls who have small, insignificant lives and make mean comments, they just show how insignificant and pathetic they are by making those kinds of comments. But also, Philip, you and I have talked about this a lot. If you don't want to support a creator, then you should do nothing. Don't engage, don't interact, because every comment you leave supports that channel. Right?
I had that the other day. What was it? Yesterday, I had lads trying to boycott my channel, and that short went all the way up from 1,000 up to 3,000, and I'm like, oh, we'll just let you guys work away there.
Right.
Start boosting the channel. Yeah. So China kind of had an overlapping history. What do you mean by overlapping history? Do you mean that they had multiple dynasties at once, or?
I mean, yeah, China's not like Europe. China's not a monolith, right? And what China is now has not always been China. So it's, there's definitely been expansion and contraction throughout the millennia that is Chinese history. And in the Tang Dynasty, in the Shilla dynasty, they were a client kingdom of the Tang dynasty. So there were a lot of really close, really close connections there, to the point where they started adopting their form of bureaucracy. They started adopting their court clothing, especially for their officials. The Shilla dynasty did, I mean. And in fact, basically the Shilla dynasty, let me see, what's the word I'm looking, relied on the Tang dynasty to basically give their seal of approval for the next monarch. So when a new king or queen would come to power, they would kind of have to get a blessing from the emperor, the Tang emperor. But the interesting thing about the Shilla dynasty is that it was not a patriarchal society. It was a very equitable society, and they had queens regnant, several, not just one. And one of the greatest rulers of Shilla was in fact a queen, Queen Sandok. So there's it was actually a good time. If people ask me if you could go back to any time in history, when would you go? Well, not many would I go, because it's dangerous to live in a time without antibiotics and germ theory. But the Shilla dynasty, I would probably go to the Shilla dynasty. It was a pretty safe time to be a woman, and the sanitation and seemed to have been really good. There were no pandemics, there were no epidemics, there were no plagues, as far as I can tell. So I would probably want to go back to the Shilla dynasty and see what life was really like.
For sure.
Good. There's a good comment here. I heard that the Korean writing characters were specifically an invented alphabet, a simplified alphabet. Can you shed any light on the background of Korean writing? Yes, I can.
Oh, nice.
So Korea has an alphabet. It is so Chinese writing is the pictograms, right? It's a pictorial system of writing, and it's very complicated. And it was used in Korea for 1,500 years at least, if not longer. But along comes this king called Sejong the Great in the 15th century. And it's interesting that in Europe, we start getting some enlightened princes who kind of all come about at that time as well. No connection, it's just a coincidence. But Sejong is a reformer. He's progressive. He passes all kinds of laws that support women, that seek to make sure that the gap between wealthy and poor does not grow, that provides social justice. And he is an inventor, he's an engineer, he's a poet, he's a musician, he's an author, he's a philosopher. He is the kind of person all of us should want to have ruling over our countries. Sejong the Great. And he realizes that the majority of his people cannot read and write because it takes way too much time to actually become literate in the Chinese writing system. And most people don't have that kind of leisure time to devote to just learning the Chinese writing system. Farmers don't have that kind of time, right? Craftsmen don't have that kind of time. And so what he realized is that there were many of his subjects had no way to defend their own rights. They had no way to even know if they had rights, if a nobleman was taking advantage of them because they couldn't read the laws. And so he invents an alphabet, what is called Hangul. And it is a scientifically designed system of letters where the letter actually imitates the shape of your mouth, the placement of your tongue and your teeth, to make the sound that it is actually indicating. So it's a very scientific alphabet. It's very phonetic. And that's the 15th century. But here's the problem. So when the aristocrats find out what their great king has done, do you think they're happy at the thought of the peasants and the hoi polloi being able to read and write as well?
Oh, no. So they went completely against it as usual.
They did. So in the next reign, basically the next reign is a massive counter-reaction to Sejong's great advancements. And among the things that they basically get forbidden to be used as the official writing system of the law and court documents, Hangul is banned. Women can use it to write. Farmers can use it to keep their own records. That's fine. You can use it to write silly fiction, silly poetry, right? But it's not going to be the official means of communication. And so Hangul, the Korean alphabet, does not become the official alphabet of Korea until the 20th century.
Oh, well, at least it survived. There's a lot of stuff like
Yeah,
that
it
that
did.
just kind of dies off, or he's
It
very kind of in bits and drabs.
and that's mostly because women were using it.
Thank God for women.
Women were using it. They were writing letter, and it became the form and the way in which they communicated. They wrote letters in it. So we actually have letters that have survived,
Mm,
written by women in Hangul from the 15th century going forward. There was even one letter. Oh my gosh, this is gorgeous. It was found in a tomb. She buried it. Her husband died, and she was so distraught by his death that she had some of her hair woven into a pair of shoes for him.
mm,
And she wrote him a letter in her own hand that talks about how he is her heart and soul, and how his passing, he takes part of her with him.
mm.
It's such a beautiful letter, and it puts a lie to the idea that there was no love between husband and wife in the pre-modern world.
Yeah, I don't get that. That's another thing as
Yeah,
well, is that when children died during the medieval period, parents were just like, "Oh well, we'll just have another one there."
yeah,
That children were endless supply, and I suppose William Marshall Senior doesn't help with that as well. When William Marshall Junior is going to be catapulted against the wall, he's just like, "Well, I already have the anvil to make more children." It's that kind of ammunition where people are just like, oh, well, children are quickly and easily disposable. But that's not
yeah.
the case at all during the medieval period,
No,
especially when
it
we
is
get into
not.
women's poetry, where women are
Yeah,
constantly, they can't get over the death of a child, from my
no.
interpretation of literature.
No, no, there's every sign points to medieval parents
Mm,
deeply loving their children and being absolutely bereft at the death of any of them. So yeah, that's another modern of these modern myths. And I don't that one might also stem from the Victorians. We have the Victorians to thank for so much bullshit that
mm.
people now spread about, so much bovine fecal matter that
Mm.
people now spread about the Middle Ages, right?
Yeah. A lot of the hygiene ideas that we have today does come from the 19th century, if I'm not mistaken. And
Yeah.
somebody else was asking as well about the Muslim world. Is hygiene within the Muslim world completely different to what we see in the European Christian world?
If anything, I would say from what and I've read, so I've actually done a lot of primary source reading on medieval Arab culture,
Mm,
for both Islam, the Islamic kingdom and kingdoms in Spain, and also in the Middle East, because I actually had a whole seminar on Arab historians of the Crusades, where all we did was for a whole semester was read chroniclers, Arab chroniclers of the Crusades, primary sources. So
mm,
they actually talk a lot about bathing and hygiene in those sources. And this might
mm,
be part of the problem, where people get the idea that medieval Europeans were dirty,
mm,
because the Arab chroniclers of the Crusades, they talk about their bathhouses. They had bathhouses, by the way, hammams.
mm,
So, and they went to them regularly. And they that was a continuation of the Roman tradition,
mm.
right? So these bathhouses were part of the ancient world, and the Arabs and all the different peoples who were living in the Middle East just kind of kept it going.
Mm.
And so cleanliness for them was extremely important. They were, if anything, more fastidious than the Europeans, but that's because they all had these really sophisticated bathhouses that were all still in operation. We're talking the 11th century, though. 11th, 12th century is when these chronicles stem to, right,
Mm,
are written. And so they talk about how the Europeans don't smell quite as sweet as them.
mm.
That's not the same as them being dirty, though, right?
No.
Because in the Middle East they had access to a lot of resins, ready access to a lot of really sweet smelling resins, out of which they could make very powerful, very pungent perfumes. But
Mm.
in Europe they didn't have the access to those same strong smells. They had herbs, and those can smell nice, but it's not going to do the same thing that frankincense and myrrh will do for you.
Yeah, very
So
true. And it's not the case, because someone in the comment section is just like, oh, it's just because the English were nasty during the medieval period. No, they just didn't have the same access the way Arabs did during the
yeah,
medieval period.
and the Arabs, and there was one chronicler I read that commented on, this was funny, on a lack of jealousy
Mm,
that the Crusaders had for their women,
yeah.
because he apparently observed how a Crusader brought his wife to one of the hammams,
Mm,
and he asked the barber there, um, who was on staff to provide barber services, shaving, because Arab men like to keep groomed as it were,
Mm.
manscaped. And according to the Chronicle, and apparently the Crusader asked the barber to groom his wife, shall we say, in
Yeah.
certain intimate areas of her body. And and the chronicler was baffled. He's like, how can he not be jealous? How can he let this strange man perform? I mean, it's nothing sexual, but still,
Mm.
how could he allow him to do that? I don't understand these Europeans, these Franks, as they call
Yeah.
them.
Oh, of
They're
course.
so foreign to me.
Mm.
But it also showed that the Crusaders and their women, their wives who went with them,
Mm.
also took up this. They were very much interested in this level of hygiene,
Mm.
and so there is no doubt. It would not surprise me if there were not a shift in the wake of the Crusades in the level of hygiene that was pursued in Western Europe because of the
Mm.
exposure to that level of grooming
Mm.
in amongst the Arab, amongst the Arabs.
I definitely would agree on that one because of the fact that you do seem to have a good standard of hygiene instead of Ireland. But Ireland was connected to the Arab world during the early medieval period, especially going into the Viking Age. Because at the very start of the Viking Age, around 840, you actually have people from what was it called? Iberia, which is modern day Spain and Portugal, actually
Right.
inside of the Great Hall of Dublin. And you have plenty of records of, Irish people batting. And on top of that as well, there's a source from England around the 10th century that talks about, quote unquote, Viking men, Norsemen stealing, what was it called? English women, but the English women willingly going off with these Norsemen because they smelled so good.
Right.
So I definitely would agree on that because of the connections the Viking world had with the Muslim world as well during that period. That the
Yeah.
rest of the world, the Frankish world and stuff, would have connected into that going into the Crusades for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And so there's a good question. Did they have essential oils and perfumes? Essential oil is a product of distillation,
Mm,
and distillation is a relatively recent invention in human history, and it didn't make it into Europe until the later Middle Ages.
mm.
So there aren't really essential oils. I'm not, it is a much later introduction into Europe. Um,
There might be,
Perfumes, it depends. It depends on what you mean by perfumes,
yeah.
right? What is a perfume?
Mm,
What are the specific components that distinguish a perfume from sweet smelling water?
mm,
So what we know they had in Europe, we know they had infused water. We know in medieval Europe, we know that they would infuse water with sweet smelling flowers and sweet smelling herbs, and that
mm,
they would use that to bathe their bodies. They would use that to wash their bodies, rather. They would use it to wash their hair.
mm,
We know that they had mouthwashes. We know that they would also sometimes steep spices in oil,
mm,
right, to make the oil smell good. But that's not really an essential oil. That's just an infused oil.
mm,
But
mm,
spices are crazy expensive in the Middle Ages, so it's not just everyone is going to have sweet clove, smelling cinnamon oil to rub on their bodies or put in their hair.
mm,
But we
mm,
do know that Europeans absolutely ground up sweet smelling herbs and the wealthy spices and to make a powder. And we know that they would actually comb it through their hair. We know that they would actually I'm getting thumbs up from all the Koreans who are passing by, for all of those who think I shouldn't be wearing Korean clothing. Anyway,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, exactly. Just racist morons. On top of that, as well, we also have was a few Koreans popping up in the chat as well, asking, "Are you in Korea as well,
yes,
Rachel? Where are you?"
I am. I am in Gyeongju, everyone. This is the Bridge of Nine Filial Piety. It's a reconstruction of an original bridge from the 7th century. It
Mm.
was, as far as I know, I think I read it was destroyed by the Mongols in the 13th century. And it is a chilly day, but it's still beautiful. You can see cherry blossoms are springing. Over there is Gyeongju, the village at the Bridge River. Basically, is what Gyeongju means.
That's an
Yeah.
interesting one as well. The comment section, hot springs.
Mm.
Did Koreans use hot springs during the medieval period? I'm unaware
Yes.
of that.
Yeah,
Ah, that's
yeah.
good to
Koreans, anywhere that they're, it seems that humans have always been drawn to stinky hot water. that's, the best, that's the best way I can characterize a hot spring. Hot
hear.
springs are pretty gross. I mean, the ones
Really?
the ones that we had in, I mean, they can be like they can smell like sulfur, right?
Mm,
The ones that we had in where I lived in Germany near Wiesbaden. Wiesbaden has tons and tons of hot springs all over the city, and they all just smell so bad. Uh, but humans, yeah, humans seem everywhere I've traveled in the world. It seems that if there are hot springs, humans have been drawn to them.
mm,
So yeah, there are some hot springs in Korea because, of course, Korea is on the Pacific Rim,
mm,
just like Japan.
mm, mm, mm.
And so yeah, people have historically, and of course, there's always been an association between a curative effect or some kind of powerful medicinal property. Because again, if something stinks, it must be somehow medicinally powerful. I think it's kind of the assumption most people make.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Not Nama. Yep. I'm in Gyeongju. It's one of my favorite places. It's cherry blossom season, so yeah, I'm here. I'm here to enjoy the cherries. And it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be a nice spring day, and my hands are numb. It's
Oh
so
no,
cold.
it's really warm here in Okinawa. It's very, very hot today. But I suppose it's going into raining season as well. Is it raining season going into
No, no,
raining
no.
season here in
Rainy
Korea?
season here is the summer. We get
Oh,
monsoons. We get monsoons. Yeah. There's an interesting question. One we've also often answered. Did potatoes, tomatoes, chili peppers, and hot dogs change Korean cuisine? Well, hot dogs haven't changed Korean cuisine, but they're present. The
uh,
other things, the other things completely change Korean cuisine. Absolutely. Tomatoes, not so much. But
mm,
potatoes and chili peppers have revolutionized Asian cuisine, full stop.
mm.
Not just Korea. Yeah.
Are you in North Korea? I don't think so. I don't know. I have a feeling that Rachel's not in North Korea right now.
No, I am not in North Korea. North Korea doesn't generally have places like this. And also, people speaking with my accent, English, don't generally end up in North Korea and are not allowed to then live stream from North Korea.
Live stream, yeah, that's quite funny at times in North Korea, isn't it? And where else are we going?
Yeah.
Oh yes, bats, bats, bats. Did they have hot bats in Europe first and
Yes.
foremost? Yes, they did.
Yes.
What
Yes. And
exactly?
we even know they had bathhouses in Dublin. We know,
Mm,
um, right? So yeah, they had bathhouses. The ones there were some that survived from ancient Rome, but eventually after the Justinian plague, they started building them again
yeah.
because people want to be clean.
Mm,
they want they want to be clean, and the number of bathhouses increases as the population increases throughout the Middle Ages. They were, one of the things you would hear if you lived in medieval Paris. One of the things you would hear in the morning is someone going through the streets calling out that the water is hot.
mm,
Come and get a bath.
yeah.
Now, did people go every day? No. Who has the time for that? I
Yeah.
mean, no. But people went. It seems that people went on average once a week.
Mm,
But in between, all you need is a basin of water and a cloth, and you can do daily cleanings that way. You don't need to submerge your body in hundreds of gallons of water for it to be clean. You just don't.
mm.
Yeah, the,
Um,
the
it,
Wenceslas Bible is full of bath scenes. Yep, for
yeah.
instance, and not a bathtub, right? In the Wenzel, you heard of the Wenceslas bath babes?
No, I haven't looked at it.
Look up the Wenceslas Bible. It's one of the most sensuously illustrated Bibles in the history of the world because it's
Mm.
just page after page of sexy bath babe attendants
Oh,
washing King Wenceslas or just standing around looking sexy.
why am I not
But
shocked?
the men being bathed are sitting on a stool with
Mm,
a modesty fan in front of the relative bits, and they're being washed with
mm,
women holding a cloth. Right? There's no tub. They're not in a tub. They're
yeah.
they're just you don't need a tub of water to be clean. That's not
Mm.
true.
I'm sure we covered this before in the video game Kingdom Come Deliverance. It's in Kingdom Come Deliverance, if I'm not mistaken, is it?
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
Hmm.
Or Deliverance
Uh,
2, Kingdom Come
yeah, the
Deliverance
second
2.
one. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
the second one.
yeah.
And where else are we? There was some good comments. And oh yes, people looking for names. Yes, my name is Philip. This is Irish
Yeah,
medieval history. Definitely go over to my channel and check that out. And this is Rachel at the Creative Contessa.
yeah,
If you are looking for us, we are over on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, you name it. We probably most likely
we're
have a
probably there.
social page on it for both Rachel at the Creative Contessa and myself, Irish Medieval History.
Yep.
Today, for anyone who's just jumped on board, myself, I'm literally just, this is a blue screen. This is actually fake. You know, I know some people are thinking to themselves, oh, is that casual there? It looks very nice. But I'll tell you a little secret. Rachel does not have a blue screen behind her. Rachel, where are you today?
I am in Gyeongju, South Korea, and welcome to the Bridge of Filial Non-Filial Piety, a reconstruction of an original from the 7th century. So
Hmm.
this is an amazing piece of architecture. It's one of my
Show us
favorite
the
places in the world.
roof there, because the roof seems very, very interesting.
Yeah,
And you're
yeah, check.
that, oh, wow. That is
Yeah,
absolutely gorgeous.
isn't she gorgeous?
Yeah. See, I have
Yeah,
to look through the same view everyone else has to be. Just for everybody at home, I don't have a special camera or anything, so I'm literally seeing what you guys see now.
yep,
And you were saying earlier that this is from the 7th century, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah. This the original. The original was built in the 7th century. As far as I can tell, the Mongols burned it down in the
Mm.
13th century.
Uh,
And they just rebuilt it, finished rebuilding it in 2019. So,
That's absolutely
yeah,
magnificent. Were there big bathhouses in Irish in big cities at the time, big towns at the time? Bathhouses in Dublin. Rachel, you've done a bit of research on
yeah.
that, have you?
I've found whether they were bigger. I cannot attest to the size.
Mm.
I've not been able to find that granular level of information, but I have found references to bathhouses in medieval Dublin. How far back they date, I don't know, but I would wager that they date back to the Norse arrival in
100%.
Dublin.
Because the fact that they had Arab arrivals straight away from the get go, like the moment Dublin is constructed, well, appears as a port in 840, you already have Arabs appearing inside of Dublin, and Arabs like to bat. And there's no Arab turning around and saying in any source, oh, well, the Norse didn't bat. In fact, the complete reverse. They talk about Norse batting in
Yeah,
Scandinavian sources.
yeah,
So, you know, straight away from the get go, it's a very good example that the Norse are batting inside of Dublin in
yeah,
840. On top of that, Anglo Saxon sources also highlight that when this is the Norse, not the Danish that come in from Denmark, this is the Norse that are hanging around both Ireland and Norway at the time. He also highlights the fact that they're far cleaner than the Anglo Saxons and that they're actually stealing our women, not in a kind of physically stealing them, but the English women are falling in love with Norse men because of how good they smell. So it's a good
yeah,
indication that there were bathhouses from the get go.
yeah. And it's chronicles like that that I think people interpret incorrectly,
Mm.
because they think that that means, well, if the Norse smelled good, then the alternative is that these other people smell bad. No, no,
Yeah.
no. There are degrees of smelling, right?
Mm.
It's not just either you smell awful or you smell great. There can be something in between smelling awful and smelling great. So it could be that the kinds of soaps or herbs or preparations that the Norse were using were just more attractive smelling,
Mm.
right? Like it's like the difference between someone who just is clean and someone who's wearing a nice attractive cologne. So
Mm.
there's, one person smelling really good doesn't mean that everyone else smells awful.
Mm.
Yeah. Jim had a question. Do I know what the flooring on the bridge is? Yes, giant wooden planks
And we can touch that and
that are
feel that because it's actually
that
real.
that are pegged together. So yes,
It's
it is. And
class.
in fact, I can through this you can see. I don't know. Maybe you guys can see. There's this one has enough
Oh,
of a split that you can see the river below.
oh, don't fall down there.
Yeah. So wooden planks, giant, heavy, massive wooden planks. Yeah.
And
This
all
this
real.
was this was an expensive thing to rebuild because timber is not cheap in Korea, and it's not abundant. And you need to have to make these kinds of, like, here's the gatehouse, guys. This is the front of this bridge, right? So to have these kinds of columns carved out of a single tree, a single piece of wood, right? Not hewn together in multiple layers. You don't get trees like this just anywhere anymore, right? Yeah, she's amazing. It's an amazing piece of architecture. Every time I come here, I'm still impressed by it, and I come here pretty often.
Was that only in Norse associated places? No, Ireland already had saunas, so they would have a
Mhm.
sauna clean. They would put themselves in a hut and they would get a sauna going, and that would build up a sweat. And with that, afterwards, they would just rub the dirt off of their bodies.
Yeah,
There may have been other methods as well of what was it called, having hot water and then adding in hot stone. So what you would do is that you would have your bath, and then you'd have obviously a wooden, just to make sure everyone knows, you put what was it called, a wooden pat underneath, right, to
right.
prevent yourself from burning at the bottom of it. And then under it, you would burn it just like you would do with, what was a cauldron. You would burn it underneath. So the Irish may have done that as well, but we're looking for more archaeological evidence to prove that. But it seems to
Yeah,
indicate that in the literature as well, that they're also having hot, warm baths and they're also having saunas. We've proven that
saunas.
they've had
Yeah,
saunas. So they definitely did have an early medieval version of a sauna in Ireland before the arrival of the Vikings. And
yeah,
hygiene is a big deal because if you look at even famous stories that are heavily studied within the Irish
yeah,
American community in the last 5 years, it talks about how Irish monks would travel from the Enale territories down into the south of Ireland, into Munster, and there
yeah.
they would expect, it was a part of being politeness in Ireland, that you would come and you would have a bath, you would be cleaned, and then you would have, what was it called, you would be fed afterwards. Oh yes, and also if you look at the Táin Bó Cúailnge as well, in
Mm.
it, Cuchulainn, he goes into a state of rage and he runs around naked trying to chop people up and stuff. And this is where
I
people
mean,
have this
as
idea
one
of,
does.
yeah, he just the problem is that people use it for later propaganda where the naked savage count, right?
The naked savages. Yeah, right.
But that's not the case at all. He goes into a complete utter rage. He starts running around naked. He turns into a creature allegedly, and the only thing that calms him down is the quote unquote the bat women. So the bat women
Mm.
bring him off, and they put him into a bat, and they clean him and cleanse him. So the fact that they
Mm.
have that story of him being cleaned and cleansed, and that's the only thing that calms him down,
Right,
highlights the fact that there was a lot of cleansing or cleaning happening, and that
right,
story is set during the Iron Age.
and not just that, but that brings him back to civilization, right?
Yeah.
That makes him
Oh
a
yeah.
civilized man again. Like that's
Mhm.
deeply symbolic, and that's
Yeah.
deeply important. We have similar. There's similar. In later medieval literature, there are similar presentations of dirty being a state of filthiness, representing barbarity, representing insanity, mental
Mm.
health issues, representing someone who is not fit to actually be in the house of God,
Mm.
right? And the people, characters existing in an extreme state of filth are represented as a plot point in
Mm.
stories, which indicates to us that it can't be normal. Because if it were normal, it wouldn't be a plot point. It wouldn't be something you would mention anything about in a story. But there's the tale of L'Enval, which is originally a lay written by Marie de France in the 12th century. There's a 1400 version of the story because it was a popular story. It got told and retold and expanded upon as stories do.
Mm.
And in the 1400 version of this story, there's an episode where L'Enval, our great Arthurian hero, right, this Breton knight, encounters this poor man outside of a church
Mm.
who bemoans his state. He says, I can't afford to to have clean clothes. Neither hose nor tunic nor stockings, or not nor their hose nor short nor tunic. And he's talking about how because he can't clean, he doesn't have a second set of clothes, so he can't clean the ones he's wearing.
Mm.
He's dirty and he's not fit to go into church, and he's bemoaning that because he hasn't been able to attend mass
Mm.
because he's dirty. which tells us that there must have been an expectation that if you went to mass in 1400 anyway, you should do so clean.
Yeah.
Which means that people must be cleaning themselves at least to go to mass,
Mm.
because that seems to be the expectation, right?
Mm.
And the whole tragedy of this point of the story is this poor man who's too dirty to go to mass
Mm.
and to basically be in the sight of God.
That's so
So,
fascinating. Yeah.
right, same idea, right? To say it's
Mm.
a similar concept of, well, the king has run mad, he's run amok,
Yeah.
let's catch him and bathe him and that will bring him back. And here we have this man who is basically now on the margins of society because of his level of his state of filth, which
But
tells us that that isn't the common situation for people to be filthy.
yeah, but what's really, really super interesting about that is the fact that, and I was actually saying that on my short this morning, is that the monastic settlements, how they're constructed, is that they're meant to be the Irish interpretation of what is a city. And I know a lot
Right,
of people are going to turn around straight away and say, "Hey, wait, actually, monastic settlements, they do not look like urban cities whatsoever. They're
right,
not supposed to be urban cities." What they're meant to be is the Irish interpretation of what is a city, because they're looking at the Romans, and the Romans are the center of civilization. So when they think, oh, city, civilization, that must be, what they're building, which is monastic settlements. So when they're building their monastic settlements, the Irish, they're looking
right,
at this as the center of civilization. The Irish see their monastic settlements as cities, as the center of civilization. And in the
right,
center of the civilized society is a church. They put a church in the middle and they build around the monastic settlements around the
right,
church. The church has to be the center because it's the center of society. In
right,
fact, when the Irish, when you have the last pagan, Ciaran MacCurbal, right? When he builds his first monastic settlement, it is in the center of Ireland. He builds Clonmacnoise in the center of Ireland on purpose. So Clonmacnoise's church is built in the center because it's the
right,
center of civilization. So it's so interesting that you have that quote about your man who cannot enter these. If that was from an Irish interpretation, an
right.
Irish person would have just like, yes, of course, you're not allowed in the center of civilization because you're not clean. Of course,
You're
that
not
makes
clean.
perfect sense. Yeah.
Yep. And we have other stories. We have stories about usually men, but sometimes women in the Middle Ages from multiple places, not just one place. From the 12th century, at least going forward, of these people who lived these really ascetic lives, these people who were so deep into their faith
Mm,
that they believed that they needed to suffer in order to be closer to God.
mm,
And one of the ways they all decided that they should suffer is by not bathing, by not
mm,
washing themselves, by not cleaning their clothing, and by just attaining this level of filth in their clothing that their skin started developing sores.
mm,
Because they were so dirty, they were getting sores. And
mm.
their clothes were so stiff with sweat and oils, and God knows the bacteria from their skin probably just populating, that they just developed these sores all over their body. And when these people would die,
Mm.
of course their bodies would be cleaned for they would clean their bodies for burial. I mean,
Yeah.
if filth wasn't an issue, why would you clean a body for burial,
Mm,
right?
mm, mm,
So they would clean their bodies for burial, and they would have to undress them. And there's so many accounts that all basically go the same way. This
mm,
is how it goes. They take the overlayers off, and the overlayers are kind of gross. But the really repulsive part is the shirt that they're wearing against their skin, which
mm.
is often so ridden with lice
Ugh.
and bugs that they're just coming off in massive quantities, and the smell is just so awful that the people write about how filthy and dirty this person was.
Mm,
If in the Middle Ages it was commonplace for people to just generally exist in a perpetual state of filth, no chronicler would bother writing about that,
mm,
because it would just be the way everyone was. But it wasn't the way that everyone was. It was the way that these crazy people were.
mm.
And they actually, in the case of one of the, he was canonized. In the case of one of the saints, I think it might have been Thomas of Becket,
Mm.
but maybe not. Um, the will had basically, the will donated all of the person's clothing to the poor. But
Mm.
his clothing was so filthy and disgusting that they had to launder it first
Mm.
before they could give it to the poor.
Yeah.
which again tells us how important it was for things to be clean, for them to smell sweet, for them not to be ridden with lice. If and that's to give it to the poor. That's not even talking about someone who has, a good income and a steady lifestyle. So if it's important for even the poor to be given clean clothing, then that must mean that the general state, the general desired goal of the society is to have a decent level of cleanliness in both your person and your clothing.
Mm-mm-mm. Those communities, when I say the early monastic settlements, there is settlements inside of Ireland itself where you have a church in the middle and then you have the society built around it. Those they're also branded from a modern perspective, also branded as monastic areas. But they're not the kind of monastic settlements that I was kind of talking about. You do
Mhm.
have in the edges of society, you do have monastic areas that are built around those areas in the very edges of Irish society. And they're the ones that are actually attacked by the Vikings. When the Vikings first come in, they attacked in the edges of society. And you're perfectly right there to highlight the fact that you have sources written in the 5th century about the clergy having to go to the edges of the world to spread the gospel and to
Right.
preach about Jesus Christ. But also on top of that as well, a lot of these, especially radical members of the clergy felt that they were closer to God when they were completely
Yeah.
cut off away from
Mm.
society.
Hermits.
Um, but it's interesting because of the fact that you do have stories like that where people want to be closer to God by not bathing, punishing themselves
Yeah.
for not cleaning. Saint Brendan used to do that, where he
Yeah.
purposely did not clean himself and would wear a woolly. We were talking about this before.
The
A
hair
woolly cloak,
shirts.
yeah,
The
the hair
hair
shirt.
shirts.
Yeah,
Oh,
he purposely Saint Brendan
oh
purposely
my
did
God.
that because he felt he was through punishment and pain and sadism. He felt he was
Yeah.
closer to God.
Yeah.
But it is very, very unique. But you do have to remember he was cut away from the society. He wasn't
Yeah.
centralized in. If there's any example, like obviously I would love to know if there's any example of people punishing themselves like that, but still going into the monastic settlements. To be honest with you, I don't know any example. And when I say monastic settlement, I mean the center into these Irish medieval cities, as I'm
Right.
branding them right now. I don't know any example of that.
Yeah, the thing is, these examples that you and I are just talking about are extreme cases, right? They're edge cases. These
Mm,
are not. This does not represent the majority of the monastic community. Someone commented about monastic rules against bathing. No, no, no. Quite the opposite.
mm,
Monastic orders have rules about bathing,
yeah.
requiring you to bathe a certain
Mm,
number of times at the very least. And there are regulations about the kind of clothing that the monks and nuns should have on any given order. And I've read several sets of rules talking specifically about the clothing. And it talks about making sure that you have at least two undershirts so that one, you can wear one while the other is being laundered,
mm,
right? So they definitely, cleanliness was the general goal, but there's these edge cases of people who feel like physical discomfort
mm,
somehow elevates their brings them to a closer state of holiness. And what it is, it's about imitating the suffering of Christ on the cross is
mm,
kind of what it comes down to, right? The idea that they want to be closer to their Savior at as profound a level as possible. And what could be more profound than maintaining this utter level of discomfort, which
mm.
also tells us that being dirty was viewed as a way to be uncomfortable on purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's itchy, you know?
Yeah, right.
What was it called? Were many early monastic sites, settlements built on old pagan sites?
Churches were. Churches
In
were for
Ireland,
certain.
it's kind of, I don't know about Europe because everyone talks about what Charlemagne did in the, what was it called, the 8th and 9th century. But
Right.
when it comes to, and
Yeah.
that's way out of my field of expertise, and people bring it up all the time. And it's like, but that's not Ireland.
Yeah.
Ireland has a stage where it blurs. Okay, as I said there, you have the last pagan king in 550. He's 100 years after St. Patrick. So everyone has this really silly idea of St. Patrick coming in, and then they're constantly referencing
Yeah.
from the 19th century folklore story, a folklore story made up in the 19th century, by the way, of St. Patrick coming in and chasing the snakes away. And then people are
Crazy.
like, well, That's the evidence that St. Patrick got rid of all of paganism. Do you know,
Or
people
the
are jumping
druids.
things.
The
Yeah,
druids.
yeah,
That's the one
yeah.
I love seeing, that the snakes are actually the druids in this story. Oh
But
my god.
that's not actually what happened. What you
No.
actually have is a blurring phase called insular Christianity, also
Yeah.
known as Celtic Christianity. So it's not a case of a Roman crusader coming in and just wiping out all of paganism. That does not happen. It never
No.
happens. What you're having is you have this information of Christianity coming into Ireland. This is the information. A dark age, something happens in Europe, it cuts off from Ireland. And so this is why we call it insular Christianity, because it's insulated, it's developing by itself
Yeah.
away from Europe. And the Irish are left with the Bible. They still have their pagan gods. They have their pagan gods, they believe in their pagan gods, but now they have Jesus. So they're looking at this stuff about Jesus and they think, God, this Jesus guy, he's pretty awesome. He's preaching about love. He says, love your neighbor. Let's make him a part of our
Yeah.
main group and everything. So that's where, and you have to remember, like, even the way that they're building cities, they're not building urban cities. They're building
No.
these churches, and they're building a settlement around it and going, what? These are the Roman cities they're talking about. This is an Irish interpretation. Like, if you look at a
Yep.
Roman city and an Irish city, you can understand, going off of writing, how they came to that conclusion. But they're completely different. And it's the same thing with Christianity in Ireland. They still have their pagan gods, but they're like, well, I suppose that God is a saint. And they're looking at Bridget. This is my interpretation, by the way. There's no like solid evidence for this. But my interpretation is they're looking at Bridget and thinking to herself, well, that must be a saint. Bridget, you're now a saint. And there happens to be a person living in Kildare at the time
Yeah.
who's also called Bridget, because Bridget is a common name. And she is the, what was it called? The Druidess of, what was it called? Of Kildare. And they're now
Right.
turning around to her and saying, look, in this book, it says you're a saint. And she's like, well, I suppose I am a saint after
I
all.
suppose I am.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? This whole idea of someone coming in there and just chopping up everyone, it doesn't happen. If you read the sources, you can see that they have information about Jesus, the Bible. They
Right.
have their interpretation of Rome, and that's what they're going off of. Rome's collapsed. Ireland is going into a golden age, and the Irish are trying to put the pieces together and going, oh, I suppose that's how we do empire. Giving a little
Yeah.
wow
So
to the
so
locals.
yeah. So the question about, were monasteries built in Europe? Monasteries were not usually built on former pagan sites or
Mm,
old pagan sites. Usually monasteries were built to be away.
mm,
They were built to be away from the town, away from the settlement, because the idea of early monastic communities, especially, was to sequester themselves from the world in preparation for the end times. That was
yeah.
like the earliest monastic settlements were that.
Mm,
And that tradition continued from the idea that in order to be closer to God, you needed to be away from the distractions of civilization,
mm,
which is why you now have some monasteries like in Frankfurt that are in downtown Frankfurt. But when the monastery was built in the era of Charlemagne, that was outside of the city.
mm,
But the city then grew, right? And so most monasteries, as far as I can tell, seem to be chosen because of it's a good location to set up a community. Like, you have running water, you've got good conditions to actually build something and have a community that can thrive, but it's away from the town.
mm,
Churches, on the other hand, churches are nearly always built. Places of worship are nearly always built in the same place. Like, no
mm,
matter what the foundational ethos of the religion is, all of us seem to want the same things. We
mm,
want it's like, well, the Celts the Celts built a temple there, and then the Romans built a temple there, and then the temple to Athena just became the Church of Our Lady,
mm,
right? So a lot of churches are definitely built on top of Roman temples, which are built on top of Celtic temples, which are built on top of some Indo-European, site, probably, because there's some common some feature about those spots that just makes humans go, yes, this is a spiritual spot,
mm,
right? There's something that just seems to trigger our brainstem about a lot of these places where churches now are, and historically something seems to have always been when it comes to spiritual worship. So
mm.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. I definitely fully agree with you there, especially the way, from my interpretation of reading the literature, especially literature written around the, what was it called, the 8th, ninth, and 10th century, that it is a case of, it's not a case of just clean cut. It's
Yeah.
a development stage. And you can even see that going into the 9th century when you have the Irish Vikings, the Hiberno Scandinavians in Dublin. They're putting up Christian crosses. They're putting them up in York. They're putting them. We haven't
Yeah.
found them in Ireland, but they're popping up in York. And in it, you have Jesus Christ in the center. But there's the script. There's what was it called? Effigies of Loki, Odin. All those characters are on these crosses and stuff.
Yeah.
And you're seeing the same thing popping up in Iceland, up around territories also belonging to the Gaul Gael, the Irish Vikings. And you have these crosses, and in it you have, the wolf god. What was his name again? Oh my god, his name is completely on my head. But regardless, you have the mixture of both the pagan worlds and the Christian world mixed together. I think there was an argument as well. I don't know if you've heard about this argument, Rachel, but the fact that the pagan world was seen as kind of demonic at times, as kind of like, because you have your evil gods and you have your good gods and your helpful gods and stuff. But Jesus was seen as, this all loving guardian, that a
Right.
church, there's some people that argue and debate, even going into the late medieval period, that when you look at the spiritual world of the folklore world and stuff that
Mhm.
it blurs into by the time you get to the late medieval period, that when people ran into a church, they believed that they were under the protection of Jesus. And that was the same thing during the early medieval period as well. That, and we have references of Vikings when they're being attacked by other people, like Brian Brew, for example, they
Right.
run into a church for protection. And it's the same thing as well, that a Viking, if let's say they had annoyed the god Loki, they would turn around to themselves and say, Jesus will protect me. And they'll run into the church looking for protection from Jesus against Loki, because Loki's after them in their head, allegedly.
Right. Right.
What,
Yeah.
what's your
I,
interpretation of
I
that?
haven't. I haven't. I will say that my historic explorations have not really pointed me. I haven't seen any primary source evidence of that, so
Mm.
I can't. I can neither confirm nor deny. um, and I prefer to just admit ignorance than make up something. But if you look at kind of you know cultures human cultures across the world all seem to develop a system of belief like that, right? Where there is a safe place, uh, a space that is somehow spiritually powerful, spiritually blessed, spiritually protective, into which you can retreat in order
Mm.
to escape the forces of evil, right? That
Yeah.
that seems to be another of these phenomena that binds us as humans.
Mm. For sure. Another problem as well, somebody else was talking about shines and stuff over my comment section. I do apologize. Some of the comments are
Yeah,
not
are
bleeding through
not
the
coming
main
through.
chat. I've actually had
It's
to flick
really
through a
weird.
few times. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I think
It's weird.
the stream's getting pretty
Yeah, we're
strange.
not ignoring you. So everyone,
Yeah.
we are not ignoring you. It's just that
Yeah.
we are getting a selection
Yeah, it's so
of comments,
strange.
even
Um,
though we should be getting all of. And
yeah.
actually, I'd like to hold that thought. I want to just tell everyone what we are. Welcome to the Medieval Buzz with Rachel from the Creative Contessa and Philip from Irish Medieval History. We are chatting today, sort of vaguely focused on medieval hygiene and
Mm,
historical hygiene, but the conversation wanders to a variety of medieval topics based on your questions.
mm,
If you're enjoying, please double tap that screen and subscribe. Okay,
for
Philip,
sure.
back to you.
Right, what was I saying? Oh my God, something about the Vikings, Jesus Christ. The Vikings run in to get saved by Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is like, "Oh, come in, come in, come
Safe
in." I
spaces, place where you
Yeah,
can go
safe
for
spaces.
protection.
My
Like,
original thought. Oh yes, shrines. That was it. I had to jump back over to the comments. Sorry about that, lads. Shrines. People are assuming all the Celts are building temples and the Vikings. Believe it or not, there's actually no evidence that the Vikings and Celtic people have built any temples yet. We are trying to find archaeological evidence to prove.
In Ireland, it's Ireland, because in Germany we have
Oh, do you?
remnants of Celtic temples. Yeah,
You
yeah,
do. So you did find
absolutely.
Celtic temples. I'll have to look
100%.
into that one.
But not now
Because
temples is a strong word, right? Like what is a temple? But
yes,
there is absolutely archaeological evidence of places of ritual worship that the
there's
Celts
shrines.
built.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we do have places of shrines, but from I don't know which way you're going for interpretation, but in my interpretation, you have shrines and temples. Shrines and temples, from my interpretation, is different because a temple is a big building that you can go into and pray. We haven't, from my understanding, especially in Ireland, we haven't found any temples. There is shrines in Ireland, most likely trees, and there could be those trees that are surviving today that people are going to talk to the fairies and. Because in Ireland we have the fairy folk, and a lot of people believe that the fairy folk were originally the Tuatha and the Tuatha were originally the gods of Ireland. Okay, so we do believe that there were shrines in Ireland, which were the holy trees in Ireland, the fairy trees as we call
Mm,
them today, right?
hmm.
So we do
Right.
believe that did exist. So just to between the difference, trying to find evidence for a temple can be quite difficult. You were saying that there might be a temple in Germany.
Temples plural. So I mean, the problem is that it can be hard to prove the existence of a building, period, no matter
Yeah.
what it was. Often all we have that have survived in some cases are holes
Mm,
in the ground, that and what we call post holes, that may or may not have been a hole in which a wooden post once sat, and maybe that wooden post supported a roof,
mhm,
maybe. But when archaeologists generally have to fill in a lot of blanks,
mm,
because what we find in archaeological excavations tends to be the foundations of a building,
mm,
which doesn't necessarily tell you much about how it looked above the ground. So, they have found, I know in Germany where I lived was particularly rich in the ancient Celtic culture.
mm,
I lived kind of in the Frankfurt area, the Limes, as it's called for those who are familiar with Roman history. And there were some sites we visited where they had excavated, and they said, well, there might have been a temple here, like an actual building,
mhm,
because we found these post holes, but we don't know. But it's a site that you know had other indications of ritual worship,
mm,
right? Or they dug under the church, like that sometimes happens. They something goes wrong in the church, they have to go into the basement and they have to do some kind of digging to try to fix broken pipes or something, so they find artifacts, and then they do an excavation, and then they find evidence of a building on that site that dates to the Celtic era,
mm,
right? Probably a temple, because there's definitely evidence of a Roman temple having
mm.
been there. But it's sometimes it's conjectural. Archaeology and history are not necessarily the clear-cut answers we would like them to be.
For sure. Right. I'll start finishing up there unless there's anything else you want to cover for hygiene, Rachel.
Yeah, let's see. Oh yeah, shrines with rocks with carvings and swirls and circles. Yeah. So actually, so down in Kaiserslautern, which is a city in the southwest of Germany, basically
Mm,
more or less, there was a church, a medieval church there, and there was a grave cover, a
oh.
medieval grave cover, and
Mm,
it had an effigy carved into it, and it had an inscription, and they were doing church renovation work
mm,
sometime in the late 20th century, and they had to pull the stone. It was in the floor, it was in the ground,
mm.
right? So
Yeah,
they
yeah.
had to pull the stone up, and on the other side was an ancient Celtic warrior carved into it
Mm,
from like the 5th century BC.
yeah.
So yeah, they actually reduce, reuse, recycle is absolutely a practice in the Middle Ages, and yeah, so they actually do find ancient Celtic artifacts like that in Germany, where they just they used the stone slab and used it to build the church floor, and then eventually they carved a effigy into it when they buried someone underneath the church floor. So
Ah, nice, nice. Any other
okay.
questions? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll start
Any
finishing
other final questions about medieval hygiene, medieval cleanliness? That was hypothetically the focus. We didn't get to talk as much about the the ridiculous statements that people have been making really heavily. I don't know. It's like someone's been listening to me and making videos that specifically refute what I've been saying. And if
Yeah.
I hear one more
Oh,
person say, for most
stop.
of history, women didn't wear underpants. For most of history, women free bled. I will, I will throw a certain someone out a window.
Hate you. They hate you. I said that in
Just,
the comments section. I said they hate you, Rachel. When it comes down to clipping of nails, there's actually a really good source in the
yes.
Norse sagas. If you look at the Norse sagas, it talks about clipping of nails. I think it's for Odin. I can't remember. But anyway, Scandinavian sources talk about people clipping nails. Do you know any other sources of people clipping nails and
Oh
how they
yeah,
would clip nails?
the medieval manuals of etiquette from the 12th century to the 15th century, all of them mention at some point that you should keep your nails clean and clipped,
Mm,
right? That you should keep them clean and trimmed is the
yeah.
word. Now, how did they trim them?
Yeah.
I have never seen a medieval nail clipper like the modern kind. I've never seen that. I have never seen an archaeological
But it,
artifact that's like super small scissors.
But in the Norse saga, it literally talks about this is what's
Oh
crazy
yeah,
about it. I don't know what
yeah,
it looks like, but it literally
yeah,
talks about him clipping the
yeah. I
nails,
mean, they're there.
gathering
They
them, and
had
showing them
something.
out the window.
I just don't know what it was.
Yeah.
I can't tell you what it was. Now they had little snips.
Mm,
I've got a pair, and a modernized version, but they're very similar, very similar. This is the modern one, but
mm,
they look pretty much like this, and they could get pretty small actually. So it could be that this may have been the thing that they used to trim their nails.
mm.
Right, that is possible. Yeah, but nail cleanliness and nail length and grooming are mentioned very frequently in a number of books of etiquette and health manuals from the Middle Ages. But you know what frustrates me, Philip? People say, well, most of them, 80%, they quote these bullshit numbers, 80% of the population in medieval Europe was illiterate. So they couldn't have read the books.
But they
Like,
had a different form of reading on top of that. So even if they did learn to read, they also could read images. Like they had a better
yeah,
understanding of the Bible than we do today because
yeah,
most of the Bible was all illustrated imagery that they would see and go. They understood a language of images that we have no idea. Even
yeah.
modern academics are looking at some of these images and going, I don't
So
know what
much
that symbol means.
symbolism, right?
Yes,
So
they
much
understood all the
symbolism.
symbols. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing is that, okay, but not everyone today actually reads health
Mm,
manuals, actually reads medical journals, actually reads scientific reports. And yet there is still a baseline understanding
mm,
of how to behave,
yeah.
of what is appropriate, of what is not appropriate. Most people, Philip, have you ever, just out of curiosity, have you ever read a modern book of etiquette? Not a
Not a
historic one, a
modern book,
modern one.
no. No, not a
Right.
modern one.
No,
Yeah.
no, most people haven't. And
Mm,
yet, that you should get up in the morning and wash your face and
yes.
bathe or do, you have a hygiene routine
Yeah.
that you didn't learn from a book. And yet the hygiene routine that you have is probably attested in a variety of modern written sources,
Mm,
right? Same thing in the Middle Ages. Those writings tell us what was common. It
mm,
doesn't mean that people were reading the manuals to learn how to do it. Those manuals indicate what is healthful and common. And this is another thing. I think this, especially Americans who live in an extremely dystopian medical system,
mm,
it probably will blow their mind, and it might blow yours a little bit when I tell you that many cities maintained on their books, part of the city government, physicians who were freely available to anyone to go and consult for medical treatment.
mm.
Bologna had like 200 or 300 physicians in the 14th century on its payroll who worked at public clinics. Anyone could go to them, anyone could get treated, they didn't have to pay a thing for it. And so those sorts of encounters are where doctors, physicians can also tell their patients, well, you need to wash your hands before and after your meal. Your nails aren't very clean. You should keep them clean. Are you actually washing your body every day? Well, if not, you need to, right?
Mm.
There were many ways for information to be disseminated then as now. You don't have to have books, but the books can indicate what the common ethos is.
Mm-mm. But how did people brush their teeth in the medieval
Mm.
period? I know people in India used neem branches to brush with, Rachel.
Yeah, the neem branches. So the evidence that I've seen seems to be that people actually used a linen cloth. and there was a paste, and different kinds of pastes, but they were abrasive, made of salt and ground up stone like pumice stone or marble or ash from the fire. And you would actually use the linen cloth to rub that on your teeth to clean it. And the salt, of course, if you had salt in it, then that's going to be really good at being antibacterial. They didn't have they didn't have like toothpaste like we understand it, but they had a paste for teeth, and they would clean their teeth at least once a day. You're supposed to do it first thing in the morning, actually. And there's actually one source that talks specifically about the scum, that white scum that kind of builds up at the base of your teeth that you have in the morning. It specifically mentions that you want to make sure to remove that, because if you don't, that will become plaque. So they actually understood about plaque buildup, and that plaque was not good for your teeth, and that to prevent it, you needed to clean your teeth every day.
Definitely, for sure. And everybody who's just leaving us, we're also going in a bit. Don't forget, guys, head on over to Irish Medieval History and subscribe. And definitely head on over to my Patreon, because not this weekend, because we have Easter, but after, on the following weekend, over on the 13th. So on the, what was it? No, the 12th. The 12th of this month, because we're on now officially, as of today, if you're living over in Asia. Obviously, if you're living over in America, in the next few hours, we're going to be starting an absolutely new month, believe it or not. And on the 13th, we're going to be covering the Scottish War of Independence over on my Patreon. So if you're interested in that, head on over to Irish Medieval History on Patreon and sign up for my classes there. Rachel, do you have any plans for Easter week? Any plans whatsoever?
Yeah, we are in Holy Week, aren't we?
Yes, we are. All about that. From all the arguing happening online about hygiene.
I know. Well, it's Holy Week in Christian parts of the world, and Korea is also partially Christian, but it's cherry blossom season here. So we've got the cherry trees have all sprouted, the beautiful, beautiful, epic blossoms. And so we've got a whole bunch of plans to visit cherry blossoms over the next week, to head out to historic places like this and walk around in the beauty that is spring. Hopefully it will be a bit warmer. But I will be doing some live streaming. Most of that live streaming, though, is going to be for my travels with the Creative Contessa channel. So if you would like to go with me on live stream walks through cherry blossom beauty and historic sites, check out Travels with the Creative Contessa. Like and subscribe and hit the notification bell. I have a medieval story time coming up on Thursday evening, my time, which will be Thursday morning for many of you. We're going to actually try to do a candlelit medieval story time. So I'm going to try to light some of my medieval oil lamps, and we'll see if that's enough light by which I can read. So I'll read medieval stories to you from a candlelit, tapestry-backed environment. And then next week, we're actually spending 3 days in a 16th century village here.
Oh, nice.
That still looks like it looked in the 16th century. It is amazing. And it's where aristocrats lived, it's where their servants lived, and we're actually staying in a 500-year-old house.
Jesus.
that is a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, we've got some excitement coming up. And of course, I have my medieval sewing party this weekend and my medieval cooking party on Sunday. So join, hit subscribe, double tap the screen, and make sure you click the notification bell. And guys, the notification bells on YouTube, you have to hit it. You have to check it occasionally, because Philip, I don't know if you've noticed this, but it changes itself. You can
absolutely wild.
You can decide, I want to know anytime this creator goes live or does something, and then YouTube just decides, psych, no, not really. So you have to check that occasionally.
Yeah, it's damaged by the bots and all that kind of stuff. Other than that, guys, thank you so much. And Rachel, thank you for all the work that you've provided today on hygiene. Definitely an argument we're going to continue to have, I assume.
Yeah,
and we'll
no
see
doubt.
what the maximum for are, especially over on Instagram. So if you want to see the latest and you said on Facebook as well. So it's been on Facebook.
Yeah, it's going on Facebook as well. Yeah, on Facebook there was someone did this video about this video that, for up until relatively recent, European women didn't wear underwear. I'm like, oh my fucking God, if one more person says that, I will explode. There will be a nuclear explosion when I explode. Anyway. Oh, Philip, are we doing our medieval buzz on Friday as well this week?
Friday this week. Oh yes, no problems. Yeah, this week as well.
Yeah.
We'll pop in and do some medieval buzz as well on Friday. So definitely,
Yeah.
guys, if whatever, that's going to be the same time as well.
Yeah.
So was our 10 a.m. What time is it for
Yeah.
the Americans?
Yeah. New York City, that would be 9 p.m. Thursday. On the West Coast, that would be 6 p.m. Thursday. 10 a.m. Standard Seoul time / Tokyo time.
Happy days. Other than that, guys, thanks very much and Slán go Bhfuil. See you.
Stay creative,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Beautiful view.